speaking there outside in the heart of Philadelphia ahead of the debate. Let's listen in here on Live Now.
Half of the college students here are $100,000 in debt because year after year after year, they were going to get rid of loans. They were going to make college affordable. How many of us here are $100,000 in debt? How many of us here can't afford to live? Did that change with Biden? Did that change with Trump back in 2020? No. And Kamala herself is a white supremacist because white supremacy has become multiracial. They want you to coerce you and say, and they keep stating lesser of two evils, and then they have Philly for Kamala. That's a bunch of bullshit. No candidate has ever had the thoughts for the people. No candidate has ever thought about the people. They were all about millionaires lining their pockets. They want you to think that they're going to give you a voice. Well, it's shown that year after year after year, the only voice was given to the whites. On top of being responsible for the displacement of Palestinians back home, they have displaced and allowed millionaires and billionaires to displace the people of West Philly, the people of North Philly. The USA was built on supremacy. You can't expect justice from a country that was built on supremacy. It was built on the backs of black and brown Americans. They want you to think that there is some sort of American dream, either candidate. There is no American dream, especially if you're black and you're brown. For months, both candidates, when they were elected, when she was vice president, when he was president back in 2020, they let hate crime after hate crime after hate crime happen to black and brown Americans. And what they do? Nothing. But their whole campaign was posed around the people. They want you to think that these candidates have the power. It's not true. They don't have the power. You have the power because you vote these people into office. They want you to think that there's a point to voting. There isn't. They don't have the power. You have the power. Over the past year, on college campuses, it was the students who had the power. It was the students who lit the world on fire, literally. And a lot of us lost everything for it and are starting to lose everything for it, but we haven't given up. And both of these candidates have said and have let Biden and Kamala Harris have let these universities arrest us and suspend us. And Trump said he would even go farther and he would deport us and he would take away our student visas. So when you're marching today, I want you to remember that you have the power. You have the power to withhold your vote. Because no matter who you vote for in office, your rights are still taken away from you. Don't let them do that to you. The only thing left you have is your power. And use it. You to remember this November what these quote-unquote candidates offered you, what they said that they would do. Because back in 2020, Biden said he would get rid of loans, he would do all these things, but instead, he had the police brutally beat up protesters and lock us in cells. So in November, we'll remember. Come 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 November, we'll remember. Free, free, free
Okay, so these people are saying come November, we'll remember. So what happened in the previous cycle? They didn't vote for Trump and they had it good, but now they're mad. Now they're mad because they got what they voted for. They chose this. They chose high inflation. They chose dispute. They chose to be against people who are good. And now they're mad that people who are bad, who are in charge, have messed things up. Why didn't you just do a little bit of research? Why didn't you just do like a tiny little amount of research? How hard is that?
We have some medics and we have marshals and we have LOs who are wearing neon. If you need a medic, they're all labeled with a red cross. If you see any illegal activities or any cops trying to agitate or talk to you, find a legal observer. They're wearing bright yellow hats or bright pink shirts. Find an LO or a medic if you need one. Also, one more announcement. The cops were not invited here. They are not escorted.
Okay, sorry, I just have to mute her sound. I don't really agree with their message. And the reason is that they chose this. That's why. Okay, this is going to get really interesting now, isn't it?
revolution. Intifada revolution. There is only one solution. There is only one solution. Intifada revolution. Intifada revolution. Intifada, intifada. Intifada, intifada. Long live the intifada. Long live the intifada. Intifada, intifada. Intifada, intifada. Long live the intifada. Long live the intifada. PPD, KKK, RDF, they're all the same. 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 People power, people power, people power, people power. Up with liberation, up with liberation. Down with occupation, down with occupation. Up with liberation, up with liberation. Down with occupation, down with occupation. For peace, for harmony, burn the settler colony. Burn the settler colony. For peace, for harmony, burn the settler colony. Burn the settler colony. Brick by brick, wall by wall. Brick by brick, wall by wall. Apartheid has got to fall. Apartheid has got to fall. Brick by brick, wall by wall. Brick by brick, wall by wall. Apartheid has got to fall. Apartheid has got to fall. Not another nickel, not another dime. Not another nickel, not another dime. No more money for Israel's crime. No more money for Israel's crime. Not another nickel, not another dime. Not another nickel, not another dime. No more money for Israel's crime. No more money for Israel's crime. Kamala, you can't hide. Kamala, you can't hide. You fund genocide. You fund genocide. Trump, you can't hide. You can't hide. You support genocide. You support genocide. Come November, we'll remember. 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 Free Palestine. Free Palestine. Free Palestine. Free Palestine. thousands and our millions. In our thousands and our millions. We are all Palestinians. We are all Palestinians. In our thousands and our millions. In our thousands and our millions. We are all Palestinians. We are all Palestinians. From the river to the sea. From the river to the sea. Palestine will be free. Palestine will be free. I'm going to interrupt our broadcast for just a little bit and ask people to please stay behind the banners or crosses. That is for your safety before anybody else's. Please stay behind the banners. From the river to the sea. From the river to the sea. Palestine will be free. Palestine will be free. From the sea to the river. From the sea to the river. Palestine will live forever. Palestine will live forever. We will free Palestine. We will free Palestine. Within our lifetime.
Welcome in here to Live Now from Fox. We did just want to cut out of that Gaza war protest, but now we want to change gears. Of course, we know the debate is coming up here tonight. And here with us, we have from Chicago, Fox 32, Fairuse. He's got the latest there on everything that you're expecting. Fairuse, of course, we know this is the first time that they are going to be debating there in the city. Of course, Harris and Trump. This is something that America has been waiting on. What can we expect?
I spoke with a pollster from Ipsos, and she said that undecideds are truly flummoxed right now. They don't know where to go. They want to learn more about Kamala Harris. They kind of have their opinion set on Trump, whether they like him or don't like him so much. But she said that the three top issues are the kitchen table economic issues, read inflation. Number two, the border. Now, Republican-leaning voters are concerned more with that. And then number three, democracy. Democratic-leaning voters are more concerned with that. And you saw this week, former President Trump put out a statement on social media calling on jailing and prosecuting folks that he says participated in 2020 election fraud. We know that those are unfounded claims. And so he's really ratcheted up some of the controversial rhetoric here. The question is, does Kamala Harris hone in on that, or does she focus on reaching out to swing voters that, like we said, still need to get
Waiting on the presidential debate here. I am not a fan of Kamala Harris. I think she's a joke.
make the contrast between the two of them. It's going to be interesting to see how Harris chooses to go at Trump. Should he throw some of those personal insults in there, or if Harris decides to bring up the 2020 election or Project 2025, will that goad Trump to go a little lower or a little more dirty with some of his strategies and tactics in the debate? This, of course, comes, as you know, in a race that's neck and neck, that's within the margin of error nationally and then in several swing states. So it's hard to say that everything is riding on this debate, but certainly at this point in the campaign, so much is riding on what happens tonight. But as we know in these elections, 2 months is a long time, and it's a long time for things to ebb and flow, and for that October surprise, perhaps, to come down the pike at some point.
And Paris, just quickly here before we let you go, we do know, of course, that they're going to be limited to 2 minutes and then their mics will be cut off. That was a huge sticking point ahead of them both agreeing to do this debate. Trump camp, of course, wanting those mics to be cut off. The Harris camp saying, hey, we should keep them on the entirety of the debate. Who do you think that is going to affect the most during this time as we are getting ready to watch them finally take the stage?
Well, clearly, from the Harris campaign statements, they think that it would have benefited them to have that mic on because they're thinking that the country or the middle-of-the-road voters will get annoyed with Trump constantly intervening or constantly interrupting, especially a woman. If he is seen as sort of trying to Bigfoot a woman or insult a woman or interrupt her and not let her finish, that's not going to play well with women voters. And of course, women voters are who the Harris campaign is counting on to turn out. She is leading among women. So it does appear that the Trump campaign, while in the past might have wanted that mic to stay on because they want their candidate to be able to say whatever he wants unencumbered, they think it's going to be to their benefit right now to have that mic turned off, and maybe we have a more civilized affair. But, that remains to be seen.
Fairuse Schutz there, Fox 32 Chicago. Thank you so much for your time and just giving us what we need to know ahead of this major debate. Of course, we do want to step away now, of course, and keep up with everything that's happening with the presidential election. But we have to take a quick 2-minute break. Stay right here with us on Live Now from Fox. Welcome back in here to Live Now from Fox. I'm your host, Christina Evans. Of course, we're keeping up with everything that has to do with this big presidential debate coming up. In fact, we are getting a look inside the arena where we can see California Governor Gavin Newsom now making some remarks from inside the arena. Let's listen in now.
Successful at making the case for the last 3.5 years, the CHIPS and Science Act, the IRA, and the difficulty was talking about where we want to go. He has that there. I think we overstate how high the stakes are. And I think there'll be some breathlessness about that. There always is. And that's what's settled. But we were just saying a moment ago, it's a game of inches. We're in the trenches. But we change routes. And we're talking tens of thousands of people, 20, 30, 40,000 years in 28 counties, 7 states. All ultimately will determine the fate and future of our democracy and the world we're trying to build. Each inch matters.
Governor, what do you make of the fact that the public doesn't seem to know? Polling is indicating they don't know. How's that?
It's been the Vice President of the United States. And, I remember years and years ago, when I was mayor, someone asked, there was a poll that asked who was the Vice President. I think it was like 2% of people who was being qualified. The point being, it's a difficult position in that respect. And so here's the opportunity. She positions herself well tonight, but she's on stage as the nominee of our party. That's why this debate matters. She has a chance to introduce to your friend and reintroduce more broadly to those that think they know her about who she is. And I think she did an incredible job at desk at DNC. I think you'll hear a little bit more about her bio. I think the why matters, not just what and how. Why does matter. What's your motivation? And I think she'll talk about you, not herself. Beyond that, I think she'll do just enough of that, and then she'll prosecute the case. Yes, prosecute the case not just against Donald Trump and his extremism, but prosecute the case for a future where we're all included, in a future where we can celebrate our differences and not be divided by the status quo, and particularly by Donald Trump.
Governor, what are you know Vice President Harris? What are you most nervous about going into this? You know she had made some
I'm not nervous. I'm not nervous about her debate skills. I'm not nervous about her debate skills. If I'm Donald Trump, I'd be nervous. Again, that said, he has more options because he doesn't play by the same sets of rules. And so he's a very challenging person to debate in that respect. And if he feels he's losing, this will get very interesting. And he will feel that very quickly. My sense is we're going to feel that right.
All right, we were able to listen into some of those remarks right there from California Governor Gavin Newsom. He was just able to give his thoughts on how Kamala Harris is going to do in this debate, of course, sticking up for her against former President Donald Trump. But again, the debate that everybody is just watching and waiting and excited to see what is going to happen when both of those candidates take the stage. Right now, I do want to bring in political analyst Brian Sobel, who's able to answer just a few of our questions before this debate kicks off. Brian, again, this is highly anticipated. We do need to know a little bit more, if you can speak to it. Maybe what are these two strategies before they step to that stage? Of course, former President Donald Trump already participating in one presidential debate this year, but Vice President Kamala Harris hasn't had her chance yet to start speaking.
Christina, to your point about preparation, actually, Donald Trump has debated 7 times on the national level. Kamala Harris, maybe once, although take nothing away from her. She has spent a lot of time in court rooms and speaking in public. Debating is a different skill set, of course, but we should learn, I think, a lot from both of these candidates tonight because of a couple of things. One is that the debate is 90 minutes long and you can explore a lot of subjects. And 2 is we're going to see temperament tonight, whether Donald Trump is goaded into getting angry or Kamala Harris is goaded into saying something where it is going to stick and be problematic for her as she moves forward. So lots on the line tonight and a lot of eyeballs, Christina, tonight watching this, I'm sure.
Absolutely. And of course, we've been also aware that former President Donald Trump, again, as you said, he's already spoken on the national stage, but he still has certain points he wants to drive home potentially to those undecided voters that will be tuning in tonight as well. What can you say about what those points are and what should be his strategy up on stage to make sure he's able to get those points across?
He has to maintain his composure to start with. And I think he has to come in there in a little while here with 3 or 4 message points. He has to, and stick with those. He has to talk about the economy and how the economy was better under his administration than the Biden administration. He has to talk about crime. He has to talk about domestic and international politics. And he has to talk about the situation on the southern border. And he has to continue to prosecute the case that the Biden administration, ergo Kamala Harris as the vice president, did not handle all of these subject matters in a way that benefited America. And he's got to stick to that. The minute he starts wandering or riffing, which he has a habit of doing, I think the audience will pick up on it. And by the way, I think that will provide the openings that Kamala Harris is being briefed to try to exploit if it happens.
And we also know, of course, with Vice President Kamala Harris getting ready to step on the stage, she's kind of shied away from the media so far in this pursuit of office right now. Of course, we do know that she was able to sit down and speak with CNN. And so we were able to see a little bit more about her policies. But what should she really be focusing on that could show that she's different from former President Donald Trump for those undecided voters who are thinking, hey, maybe this guy's not right for me. What can Harris say to win those voters over?
It's an excellent question because it's the contrast between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. And we've discussed what I think Trump needs to do coming in. Here's what I think Kamala Harris has to do coming into the debate tonight. I think she has to be very specific, again, around 4 or 5 issues. She has to know her facts. She has to prosecute the case around those 4 or 5 subjects. She has to parry, I think, effectively with the former president. And I think she needs to be a little clever about that. I don't think she needs to rise to his challenges. He's going to try to draw her out a little bit. But I think if she can remain calm, go back to her subjects that I think she needs to discuss with the American people, I think she'll have a good night. This is not a forum, again, as we said at the top of the interview, that she spent a lot of time in on a national level. But again, lots riding on this tonight. A huge national audience, at least for part of the debate. If it gets kind of boring, people will wander away as they typically do in these things. But for the first half hour or so, I think it's going to be a substantial number of American households that will tune in to get a confirmation or an affirmation of what they think these candidates are all about.
And Brian, right before we let you go, I do have to ask you, of course, we know that these swing states have been of the utmost important this election cycle, as they always are. Philadelphia is one of those swing states. And also right now in the heart of Philadelphia, we've seen those Gaza war protesters out there making sure their voices are heard. This should be a pretty big sticking point. How do you think these candidates are going to each handle that big question?
Well, to your point, Pennsylvania is an important state, and the debate is in Philadelphia tonight. So I think that's symbolically very important, and in fact, it's important. One of the subjects that I think will come up is the handling of the Gazan situation, the negotiations that have been going on for a very long time between the Biden administration and the governments of Bibi Netanyahu and Hamas, which haven't produced anything, and Donald Trump's declaration that if he wins the election, the war will be over before he's sworn in. All questionable questionable thoughts and questions that need to be answered as we go forward. But I think that will be one of the 4 or 5 issues that will be discussed tonight, and Kamala Harris has to be ready to answer it. And frankly, I think Donald Trump needs to take a more realistic view of what he can accomplish in the Middle East. Just saying you're going to end the war is not the solution to the problem.
That's Brian Sobel, political analyst, just answering a few of our questions ahead of this major presidential debate. Brian, thank you so much for your time. We certainly appreciate it.
Absolutely, Christina. Have a great evening.
You too. We do want to go ahead and remind you again, this is something that's going to be important as we are following this presidential debate. We will be holding it right here on Live Now from Fox. We'll be holding the ABC News presidential simulcast for the White House. Again, our coverage is going to kick off fully here in just a few minutes. We are going to step away for a quick 2-minute break. Stay right here with us on Live Now.
Okay, these guys are getting ready to debate. It should be a very good one.
Now from Fox, I'm Andrew Kraft. Thank you to my colleague Christina Evans for getting us all ready for this monumental night in American politics. For the very first time, former President Donald Trump will face off against Vice President Kamala Harris. And I don't have to say this because you know it so well that how the contours of the presidential contest have changed so dramatically over the course of this summer. And that is why we are in this moment here. They are on the debate stage at the National Constitution Center in Philadelphia, really the place where it all began, the birthplace of American democracy, the city of brotherly love. We have so many different vantage points inside what is known as the Media Filing Center there. And you can see so many reporters, so many surrogates of these campaigns getting ready to make the case for their chosen candidate. You see there, Arkansas Senator Tom Cotton as well. We also have some reporters in a lot of these gaggles going on with some of these surrogates, speaking to the press about what is in store for tonight. What are the stakes? What do the candidates need to do? Not only to shore up their base of support, but convince some of these voters who might be on the fence, those swing voters, those independent voters as well. And I think it's safe to say, I've been saying this for the last couple of days, in the wake of the June 27th debate between Biden and Trump, going into that debate, many had said, well, debates don't really move the needle. Debates don't matter that much in the entire big picture of everything. Well, I think it's safe to say many have been disabused of that notion. That is no longer operative after what we know happened post that debate, Biden's disastrous performance leading him to withdraw from the top of the ticket. That is how we are here today. And like I said, I'm Andrew Kraft. We want to thank everyone for being with us here. We are gearing up for, at the top of the hour, some of our really great coverage, bringing in so many people who know politics by the back of their hand. They cover it day in, day out. They live and breathe it. And we're going to be talking to them because they are the best to help us make sense of what is in store tonight there on the stage in Philadelphia. So we have a beautiful live picture there over the Philadelphia skyline. We also have live vantage points inside there. This is the Media Filing Center there at the National Constitution Center. We're going to try to see if we have an outside vantage point at the debate venue as well. So we're just getting started here. It's almost the top of the hour. We'll be guiding you through our hour-long coverage as we will be simulcasting the ABC News presidential debate starting in just a little over an hour's time.
Okay, I got Trump in the background there. So, let's see. Okay, I got Trump in the background there.
Right, and you can see there maybe some familiar faces in the Media Filing Center. There's CNN's Brian Stelter, just walked out of the frame. But let's get it started here. Like I said, it is 5 o'clock here on the West Coast, 8 o'clock there in Philadelphia as we gear up to start this pre-debate show, all the coverage, all the analysis that you need to know as we go into this debate. And hopefully you'll be better informed if you so choose to go into the ballot box on November 5th or before. In the meantime here, let's bring into the conversation our friend, Essie Cup, Battleground host. She joins me. Essie, good to see you here. Happy debate night. I was just reminding the viewers, you know, how different tonight would have looked if all the events of the previous 2 or 3 months of the entire busy summer had not happened. Those are hypotheticals at this point. This is the moment. This is the reality that we are in right now. It's going to be Trump and it's going to be Harris on that debate stage in an hour's time. How did we get here?
This has been a roller coaster of an election for sure. What you would normally consider black swan events, right? A candidate literally dropping out midway through his campaign as the incumbent was one of those, but we've had several. And we've always known this race was going to be really tight. That's why at Battleground, we focus on the swing states, but I don't think any of us anticipated just how wild it was going to be.
Essie, do you think in hindsight, looking at some of the recent polling, this is a jump ball. It's very, very close. That's what the polling suggests. I think the average poll of polls has Harris up only slightly against Trump here. But this is in Philadelphia. Pennsylvania, all things hinge on Pennsylvania, or so everyone says here. Harris needs Pennsylvania to win the election. Should she have gone with Josh Shapiro as her running mate, or is that a moot point at this point? Will it not matter, or should she have?
I think if she loses, that will be a thing people say.
Oh.
Yeah, had she maybe, because so Pennsylvania has the most electoral votes of any of the swing states. It has 19. That's why it's the big prize. And it's a very diverse state. It's hard to run it because you've got the population centers, Philadelphia and Pittsburgh and State College, and then everything else around it is very, very red. And there are all kinds of voters in those red pockets. There are Hispanic voters in those red pockets and black voters and young voters. So it's hard to run in Pennsylvania, but both candidates really need it. She had an opportunity to pick not only a governor from a key swing state, but a very popular governor, right? Pennsylvania loves Josh Shapiro. So I think if she loses, people, the way that they looked back at Hillary Clinton's loss to Donald Trump, they said she didn't go to Wisconsin, she didn't campaign enough in Michigan. I think that is a thing. She loses Pennsylvania that people will say, and we'll never know fully, but I think it's a fair critique.
So as you know, and you've been following it, you've been covering it, that, the Harris-Walz camp has been somewhat, I don't know if hesitant is the right word, and maybe not stonewalling is the right word, but they haven't done much media. They haven't done much kind of open format, off the cuff conversations, interviews traditionally with the mainstream media here. Yes, there was that joint interview they did many, many days after the convention, your colleague there. Do they need to start doing more? Is the Harris nominee DNC sugar high coming to an end here? Is the virtuous cycle of the coverage coming to an end? There could be a lot of big crises in the next 50 plus days, on the world stage, domestically here. Does she need to get out there more after this debate?
So we've been talking to swing state voters who are undecided. And the first thing they say as to why they're still undecided is they don't know Kamala Harris enough. And, as soon as she was sort of the nominee, people like me were saying she's got to do interviews. She's got to do interviews. People don't know who she is. And the critique against us was that it was, this inside the beltway, or sort of like the ego of journalists, right, making this demand. But no, it is voters. It is voters telling us they want to see more of her. And the debate is something they were waiting for. They told us, these undecided voters in swing states said, I'm waiting for this debate to make up my mind. So in this way, this debate is much more momentous and impactful than debates usually are, because the very voters that Trump and Kamala Harris need to win are literally waiting for this moment to decide. But if they don't feel like they're getting enough from the debate, then absolutely, she will need, just very practically, to do more interviews where she answers more questions, where voters get more familiar with her. There's also a question about accountability, and that's the job of the press, is to hold powerful people accountable, to ask questions. She has a record as a senator. She has a record as a vice president. She should have to answer questions about her record, as well as questions about what she would do moving forward if she were president. And so I think those interviews will be really important for her, practically as well as philosophically.
That's so interesting because since she became the presumptive nominee, we've seen this narrative form that Harris has had to redefine herself in the national consciousness and conversation, even though having been vice president for the last 3.5 years. She was a senator, of course. She was very prominent in California politics here. I guess my question to you is, what does that redefinition look like after tonight? This will be the first time many American news consumers and the electorate writ large will have seen her in this format since 2020, when she went up against Vice President Mike Pence here. And then there's the question of all of her policies.
Time to crush your doubts and prove that permanent dental implants aren't just strong, but they're also affordable. But oftentimes people believe that getting permanent dental implants can't possibly be affordable. But that's simply not true. We've helped just under 10,000 hard-working people just like you do what they once
I don't know what that garbage is, but I don't have dentures, so I don't want to see that stupid commercial.
And welcome back here to Live Now from Fox. I'm Andrew Kraft. Happy debate night here. Thanks for choosing Live Now as your go-to source for all things live, raw, and unfiltered. And politics is ramping up 55 days till the presidential election here. You might wonder, well, what are the other surrogates doing on this debate night? Take a look at this. We have an event that Minnesota Governor Tim Walz will be appearing at in the battleground state of Arizona. He met with Arizona Governor Katie Hobbs just in the last hour here. So that is how the Harris-Walz campaign is sending out these messengers to yet another battleground state of Arizona. That's a live picture there. We also want to get back to Philadelphia, though. Take a look at some of these live protests that are going on near City Hall in Philadelphia. These Gaza war demonstrators making their voices heard. No doubt, you can imagine, foreign policy will be brought up in the debate as the Israel-Hamas war and conflict there almost nears its one-year mark since the October 7th terror attack there by Hamas into Israel. Let's go back, though, inside the Media Filing Center at the National Constitution Center there in Philadelphia. A lot of reporters gearing up for it. Let's talk to some reporters, including our friend there at Fox 13 in Tampa, our friend Craig Patrick. He joins us. Craig, always fun to talk politics with you on these big nights. We spent kind of the majority of the top of this hour talking about what Harris is doing, how Harris is preparing. Let's talk about Donald Trump, because really the Trump campaign, you can make the argument, they had to switch gears. They had to do a complete 180 after Biden withdrew because they had a new opponent. How is Trump doing with a new opponent? Has any of his attacks against Harris landed with a blow or landed with a thud here? Has he made the case against her, or is he struggling?
He's struggling. He's clearly struggling. He has not found a specific line of attack that has resonated and has moved the needle in the polls, and that really has worked even within the base in terms of reverberating and driving a narrative. And that's why the former president has tried several lines of attack, is throwing the kitchen sink at Kamala Harris, trying to find a line of attack that works. He's ultimately planned for months, if not years, on a campaign focused on President Biden, and then had to pivot. And he is struggling with that pivot. That much is sure. But what's also sure is that we're seeing a race that's effectively tied, taking it right back to where it was near the beginning of the year before President Biden face planted in his first debate and lost so much ground. So with this, yes, he has not found a line of attack yet that works, but he's also had a good deal of time in debate preparation and a lot of counsel that may have identified one that we'll see tonight. But in the end, while Kamala Harris gained some ground that President Biden lost in the race through the latter part of July and through much of August, it's ultimately led us right back once again to the very same place. This race is tied. The election map has opened up back to where it was several months ago, where it will ultimately be decided by 7 states. And within those 7 states, we're seeing the latest round of polling, which will all be moot, by the way, after this debate, because this will likely be a turning point, but showing that it's tied state after state after state within the margin of error.
Yeah, of course, Craig, I think it's safe to say debates do matter. We learned that lesson after Atlanta in late June here. You know, Craig, we were talking with some of our other guests about some of the policy reversals that have been made by Harris, you know, just recently, some moving away from her far left positions that she staked back when she was running for president for the first time. Donald Trump, though, also with some policy reversals in the last few weeks. Do voters care that the candidates flip-flop, so to speak? Do they care that they have to defend why they flip-flopped or not? Are we past elections where that matters?
Well, it does matter to a certain extent. It was certainly costly to John Kerry, for example, when he was before he was against it. Yes, it can work against you. It certainly worked against Mitt Romney as well in 2012 when he tied himself in knots over the issue of immigration. You can't dismiss it, but I think there are far more important issues that are more likely to drive voting behavior as well. And that certainly starts first and foremost with the economy and more specifically, the rising cost of living. So I think that will be a focal point of the debate if the moderators certainly take it that direction. Polling shows that is the number one issue, and it also is the border crisis as well. And so that's why I think we can expect to see former President Trump go on offense on both of those points, blame Harris, as vice president in the Biden administration, for the surge of inflation and the border crisis, though both of those things have gotten better in recent months. They were very serious problems through much of the Biden administration.
So, Craig, what about the issue of abortion? We know it's particularly acute there in Florida, so much so that former President Trump has had to answer about how he might vote on this ballot referendum there in the Sunshine State. But we know this is the issue in Kamala Harris's wheelhouse. Even before she was the nominee, you know, as vice president, of course, she's still vice president, she was out there talking about reproductive rights for the last year and a half. That was in her portfolio. Is she going to bring it up first, or are the moderators?
Well, if the moderators don't, I guarantee you that she will and Trump won't. I mean, they can see the data and the numbers. It does behoove Harris to move in that direction if the moderators haven't taken it. So I suspect they will within the first third of the debate. If not, I suspect she will take it in that direction. And yes, the economy and border security are front and center, but not far behind, you do have the abortion issue. Let's not forget, in April, when President Biden was still running for president, his one trip to Florida was focused singularly on the issue of abortion. Democrats think that is a winning issue for them, so bet that Harris prepared for it, and she has more than a thing or two to say about it tonight.
You know, Craig, just lastly, this is somewhat inside baseball, the nitty-gritty, so to speak, but I'm kind of fascinated how campaigns prepare for moments like this. One of the rationales for Biden's debate performance was from his camp that he over-prepared. Harris has been in Pittsburgh for the last several days preparing. She landed in Philly just yesterday. Not entirely sure the reporting on how Trump has been preparing. No doubt he has been preparing here. How do the campaigns do this?
Well, they all take different tacks. For an incumbent president, we're talking about an incumbent vice president, but for an incumbent president, President Biden, though he's failed in spectacular fashion, he's not the first to fail. Most incumbents do for a couple of reasons. One, they're rusty. They haven't debated in that format in quite some time. And two, they become used to not being questioned and having to get into that kind of forum. Certainly, President Trump skipping debates in the Republican primary could work against him because he's only had one true face-off. And that one was not much of a challenge because, frankly, President Biden was as ineffectual as he was. Yeah. But yet Kamala Harris also has a challenge, too, in that things move the way they did. She didn't have debate opportunities, too. So, yes, they all have different ways in which they prepare. And we know from what we've read that Trump and Harris are preparing in two very different ways. Trump more informally, sitting around a table, bouncing ideas and policies back and forth, versus the more structured approach with an actual stand-in for the former president that the Harris campaign is taking.
All right, Craig Patrick, as always, can't thank you enough. Have a good debate night, Craig. We'll check in soon. Thanks, my friend.
Thank you. Take care.
All right. In the meantime here, we are just getting started. Can't thank Craig Patrick there enough. Now, if you're wondering about what some of these debate rules are tonight, I want to put up this graphic that we made here. Let's take this here. So this is what we know. Now, remember, these are the rules the campaigns agreed upon, that the microphones will be muted when the opponent is speaking. There will be 2 minutes per answer and 2 minutes per rebuttal, plus an additional minute for follow-ups, clarifications, or responses. Now, remember, no opening statements and closing statements will be 2 minutes per candidate. Remember, Donald Trump will have the final word. That is what he requested since he did win the virtual coin toss. There will be no props or pre-written notes will be allowed on stage. Also, campaign staff may not interact with candidates. And each candidate will be given a pen, a pad of paper, and a bottle of water. That's all they get. There's no audience. There's no crowd. You're not going to hear hooping and hollering. It will be Harris, Trump, and the debate moderators, Lindsay Davis and David Muir. All right. Now, remember, during these major political events, we always want to hear from you. And remember, as we prepare for this debate, we want to know what you're thinking about the election, about the issues that matter the most to you. Which policy do you want to see the next president prioritize here? Let's put this up. Now, You can vote here. You can scan that QR code, or you can go to livenowfox.com/connect. Now, you can see there, some have already voted for the economy, but we also have healthcare, foreign policy, education, crime, immigration, abortion, or another issue that might not be in this format that we have chosen. So there are several issues, like you just saw, that you can choose from. Again, just scan that QR code on your screen or go to the URL livenowfox.com/connect and cast your vote. We want to hear from you. Which issue, which policy should the next president prioritize? Boy, are there a lot of them. We're probably going to hear about a lot of them on the debate stage happening in just a little under 40 minutes time. Now, we're gearing up as well for so many of our friends and colleagues and reporters and analysts and experts to help us make sense of what we're all going to watch in just a matter of time here. But the surrogates, they're out in full force for the campaigns now, including North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper. Remember, he was on the short list. He was in contention to be Harris's running mate. He withdrew his name from contention. You know how the story goes from there. He's speaking to reporters now. Let's hear what he has to say.
Lies and insults, but I feel confident tonight that she's going to lay a plan out that protects the middle class and will encourage some of these people who have not been involved in the process and who have not been voting. This is an important time in the history of this country, and it's time for them to be involved in this decision-making process.
Do you think she'll be able to introduce herself the role she would like to, as combative as former President Trump can be?
Yeah, well, I think she's going to, as she has so far, ignore his insults. I think she has to make some decisions about what lies she corrects, because she could spend her entire time in fact check when Donald Trump speaks. But I think she's got to figure out what lies are important enough for her to tackle. She needs to make sure that she's talking about women's reproductive freedom, and I know that she will. This is going to be a huge issue in North Carolina. One of the truths that Donald Trump has told is that he did obliterate Roe v. Wade, and now many states across the country have abortion bans, like North Carolina, and people in North Carolina do not like it. It's going to be one of those issues that I think gets people off the couch and into the voting booth this time. So she needs to pay attention to that.
She goes to Greensboro on Thursday. What resonates with
I'm sorry?
She goes to Greensboro this week. What resonates about her with North Carolinians? What are you finding them say?
Yeah, I think she's going to be in Charlotte and Greensboro, and I think people are thankful for the role that she played in helping to expand health care in North Carolina. We expanded Medicaid, the Biden bonus, the Biden-Harris bonus that we got helped the Republican legislature do that. 530,000 people now have health care. A lot of people now are getting hooked up to high-speed internet in our rural areas. I think she will talk about that, and people are going to know about that. But I think people are also going to want to hear about how she's going to tackle the cost that everyday families are feeling, and particularly this child care issue that I talked about earlier. This is one that many families, I call it the triple play, and Donald Trump doesn't understand it, but early childhood education, scientifically overwhelming that they need it. Parents need to be able to work to support their families. Employers need to hire those parents. This is a triple play. This is where government does need to come in with child care stabilization grants and with higher subsidies and help these parents, child care tax credit, help these parents deal with child care, help the kids get the start they need, help the employers with the workforce. Donald Trump does not understand that, and with J.B. Vance's comment about grandparents and aunts and uncles taking care of the child care, that's just clueless.
Is North Carolina in play, especially with the ratings that Josh Stein is getting right now?
For sure.
Have you given Vice President Harris any advice?
Well, she doesn't need my advice, but when she comes to North Carolina, which she has, this will be the 18th trip that she will have made to North Carolina as Vice President of the United States. And I've met with her every time she has come, and we'll stop at some North Carolina places. She loves our state. But we'll talk about the health care that we've been able to expand to people. We'll talk about the fact that North Carolina, by one vote.
All right, so North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper there talking to reporters in the spin room. We're going to get into more of these surrogates from the campaigns. We've seen a lot of them so far. We do have more analysis, though, to get to. We want to go out now to some of our friends there, including Sherry Bustos and Kevin Cabrera. They join me. Sherry and Kevin, thanks for being with us here. We are almost at the bottom of the hour. This is happening very, very soon here. We want to thank you for being with us, though. Sherry, first to you, what does Harris need to do tonight to win this debate? What does she need to do to redefine herself for the American people, maybe reintroduce herself for the American people? Is this her natural habitat or not?
Well, I think she has to have an A+ performance. This is a high stakes event tonight. It's likely to be the only debate between now and the next almost a little less than 60 days until the election. A lot of people don't know who Kamala Harris is, and I think talking a little bit about her bio, those who did not watch the Democratic National Convention events where her bio was on display 4 straight nights in a row. This is her chance to introduce herself to the American public and to perform in a way that she's never performed in the past. High stakes. She's a prosecutor, so she knows what it means to be prepared for something high stakes. And if I were Kamala Harris, I would act like this is the most important court performance that she's ever had in her life, and pull it off in grand fashion.
You know, Kevin, there's been a lot of talk that this election, or at least elements of the Harris campaign, have all been about vibes and the sugar high that she has gotten, since she became the nominee and post the DNC here. And you can make the argument on whether or not that sugar high is still going, but there have been attacks leveled by former President Trump, against her race, against her gender here. Is he going to keep it all substance tonight, or is he going to go there?
Well, I think first and foremost, I think you bring an interesting point. We saw in the CNN poll and the New York Times poll where President Trump was up 1%. So the honeymoon is over. What I'm excited is that Kamala Harris has finally come out. She's facing the press, and we'll see which one comes out. The one from 2020, the one from the last 59 years, or the one where she presented a whole new Kamala Harris on that CNN interview where she changed all sorts of positions. What will be interesting is to see is that contrast today that President Trump will display. Kamala Harris and her policies and the Biden administration that have destroyed our country, and his policies that will help fix us and take us back to where we were under his mandate.
Jerry, has Harris been in a bubble or not? Are those claims unfounded or overblown?
Well, I think the American public has been pretty lucky to have this abbreviated campaign since Joe Biden got out of the race. It's actually been interesting, fun. I can tell you this, the Democratic base is fired up. I live on the Wisconsin state line. I'm a former member of Congress from Illinois, where I border both Iowa and Wisconsin. And I've got people reaching out to me saying they want to drive into Wisconsin, which is still a swing state, still up in the air as to whether Kamala Harris can win that. And it's an important state. And people want to go up there and knock doors, go door to door. And but people are fired up about her, and they're still very excited. The Democratic National Convention was exciting. And it was energized by wonderful speeches and music and fun. And there's a whole new energy in the Democratic Party who's fired up to go out and work for Kamala Harris and vote for Kamala Harris.
Kevin, just lastly, too, we've already seen Donald Trump on a debate stage this year. What can he do to convince or persuade voters who might be on the fence about him tonight, going forward here? Can he do anything? Or is Trump? Is everything we know about him baked into the cake? Is anyone persuadable in the Trump camp?
Well, first, one thing to talk about that abbreviated campaign, I think the saddest part about that is that 14 million people voted for Joe Biden and they didn't have the ability to vote for somebody else because he wasn't removed until after all of the primaries. But in terms of tonight, listen, on the first debate, President Trump defeated one candidate, one debate. So we're looking forward to tonight. We'll see who the next Democrat nominee might be. If he happens to defeat Kamala Harris this evening as well.
Okay, there. I don't think that's the likeliest scenario. But Kevin, Sherry, I can't thank you enough for your time. I know you guys got to go, and we'll be watching alongside you.
Good to see you.
All right. All right, in the meantime here, we are at the bottom of this hour. We have a lot more in store this hour as we will be talking to so many like Sherry and Kevin. They have a lot of experience in electoral politics. Will this debate move the needle at all for anyone here? We are getting very close. We'll see you in 2 minutes. And welcome back here to Live Now from Fox. I'm Andrew Kraft. Thanks for choosing Live Now from Fox for all your debate needs here. We'll be simulcasting the ABC News presidential debate in just about 25 minutes time. We have a lot going on right now. Remember, we want to get you involved here, and about 7,500 of you have already voted on this very question. Which policy should the next president prioritize? Is it the economy, healthcare, foreign policy, education, crime, immigration, abortion, or another issue there? It looks like economy taking the cake and then not too far behind on immigration. Well, there's still time to vote. You can scan that QR code in the upper right hand of your screen, or you can visit livenowfox.com/connect. Also, let's get back to Philadelphia here. We have a gorgeous nighttime skyline view there in the city of brotherly love. There are some protests going on at the moment, not too far from City Hall there in Philadelphia. As you know, these Gaza war demonstrators have been taking the opportunity to make their voices heard, not only for the occasions of these debates, but also at the RNC and the DNC as well. No doubt foreign policy will be brought up later on in the debate as among some of these other issues here. And then, of course, let's get back inside to the National Constitution Center. That is the venue where Trump and Harris will square off for the first time. Remember, we haven't seen Harris in a debate setting or a debate format since 2020 when she squared off against then Vice President Mike Pence. Of course, you just saw Donald Trump on the debate stage there in Atlanta against Joe Biden on June the 27th here. So, like I said, I'm Andrew Kraft. Let's keep bringing in our friends and reporters who know a lot about politics, and this is fun. We're going to do that right now with Fox 5 DC's Tom Fitzgerald. He joins me. Tom, good to see you. Happy debate night here. What's at stake, Tom?
Well, good evening, Andrew. Good to talk to you as well. I think everything's at stake here. If you had predicted 8 weeks ago we would be where we are tonight, I don't know if anybody would have believed it. But, after the cavalcade of news that took place after Joe Biden left the presidential race, after, dramatic Republican National Convention coming just days after an attempted assassination against former President Trump. And then, the ascension to Kamala Harris to the top of the Democratic ticket in that boisterous convention they had just last month in Chicago. I don't know that anybody would believe, the sequence of events politically that have rolled out over the last couple of months. So where we are tonight will really be kind of resetting this race for a lot of these swing voters, people who have still not made up their minds, and especially in these all crucial battleground states. Andrew, as you probably saw, Morning Consult came out with a lot of polling today in a lot of these battlegrounds. Kamala Harris has maintained and built on the post-convention bounce that she had, but it's still very tight. It's still very close, and that suggests that there are some people that are going to be tuning in tonight, probably a lot of people tuning in tonight, looking to make a decision here as to whether or not they want to elevate Kamala Harris into the Oval Office, whether they want to return Donald Trump to the Oval Office or keep him out and go in a new direction.
Tom, that's such a good point. Harris has made up the Biden polling deficit since she became the nominee. And it is a jump ball. It's that close. It's practically tied with the margin of error here. Do you think, going forward, if Harris doesn't break through in the polling, say beyond the margin of error after moments like this, that Democrats may have, buyer's remorse about elevating Harris to this position, or is it just too early to tell?
I don't think they have buyer's remorse right now, because look at where they were. Joe Biden, his ship was taking on water even before that debate performance against Donald Trump. They were hoping that was going to turn down the chatter, turn down the internal discussion in the Democratic Party that perhaps they should make a change. That debate solidified that. And that's, I think, in large part why we saw events move so historically and so rapidly as we did. They're in a lot better position as with having Kamala Harris in this race, Andrew. The numbers back this up. There was polling that came out just today from the Washington Post. Harris now up 8 points in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Now, yes, that's a state that Joe Biden won by 10 points 4 years ago. But when Biden was in the race, there were several polls, including Fox News and Roanoke College, who had Virginia at dead even. Now, were Republicans going to take Virginia? That would have been a tough goal for them to reach. However, it was going to force Democrats to spend more money and spend more attention in a state that President Biden had won by double digits. So Harris now has them, at least, in Virginia, back on solid ground over the margin of error. And, they hope to build on that after tonight, because, that's success or failure in this debate. It'll be good for them if she has some one-liners and some things that go viral and get people talking about it on social media. But the proof is in the pudding here. They've got to get these battleground swing voters on their side, or, they're going to be having a steep hill to climb. Because remember, the Republicans and the Democrats are kind of playing the same game here, but in different ways. Donald Trump has lost popular elections and he has won the White House. The Democrats' goal is to do both: win the popular election and also win the Electoral College. So that's what's on the table here tonight. Sure. That's what both are trying to do.
So, Tom, that's so interesting, and you brought that up, and now I'm remembering, because for the Trump campaign in May and June and after the debate, they were seriously putting resources, and they were talking about these states that normally aren't in play for Republicans, that could have been in play at the time: Virginia, Minnesota, New Mexico, Colorado, New Hampshire. You don't hear that as much anymore. You really don't hear that at all anymore coming from, GOP operatives and posters here. But to your point about this summer that we have had, you're a student of history. I cannot wait to read the book about what happened in 2024, the summer of 2024 here, because it's fascinating about where we were in the spring to how we got here in the fall. And we don't have to dwell on that. I think our viewers know what has all transpired in the interim here. But when you want to talk about viral moments in a debate, and there are ones from history that we can get into, but the mics will be muted just like the last debate. There aren't going to be that many opportunities. Of course, the viral moments from the last debate, Tom, were ones of Biden stalling, his halting performance. They weren't of Donald Trump here. So I thought that was quite an interesting contrast because in 2020, all of the viral moments from that one debate between Biden and Trump were from Trump, who kept interrupting Biden time and time again. Biden could barely get a response or answer out here. And then that kind of dovetails into the conversation overall about the feelings of this election. Are we in a substance election? Is it substantive, or is it purely personality? Is it purely vibes, Tom, right at this point in time?
That's one of the big questions I have coming into tonight. Obviously, people tune into these things because they want to find out what a future president of the United States has planned for the country if they were to be elected. But, clearly these debates are not just about that. Everybody wants to be high-minded about these things. But yeah, people tune in because they want to see that knockout blow. They want to see that one-liner. They want to see that thing that everybody's going to be talking about the next morning around the water cooler or the coffee pot or whatever passes for social interaction in the workplace these days. They want to see that thing. Now, if that comes, by way of a zinger or a fact check or just some unscripted moment, that's the thing that both campaigns are going to be looking for, that they can put into an ad, that they can put onto social media, that can use again and again and again to drive home whatever message it is they want to send about their opponents. Now, one of the things Harris has to be careful about is that she is facing, the most seasoned presidential general election debater in American history. We've had other people that have been nominated 3 times for president of the United States. Certainly Richard Nixon jumps to mind, but, he didn't have a series of presidential debates. What Trump brings into this tonight is a vast wealth of experience, having been at these podiums before against now, 2 other candidates in Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden, and also his vast television experience before he ever became a political figure. So, she, yes, has been a United States senator and an attorney general and a prosecutor and is, prosecuting cases in a courtroom. This is a different arena tonight, and it's one that Trump has shown in the past that he has a command of. So the last time Kamala Harris did this was 4 years ago against Mike Pence.
Right.
I think no matter what you want to say about either man, Mike Pence and Donald Trump are 2 very different individuals, and we expect him to, debate very differently.
Yeah, of course, we know Pence is not even voting for Trump. How their relationship has changed in the last 4 years. Tom, I wanted to ask, too, because Harris ran for president once before. I covered her primary campaign back in late 2019. And she took positions then that she has moved away from now. Some then were quite progressive, far left. Many have described them on a whole host of issues here. And I will be looking for whether or not the moderators, get clarity on some of her policy positions now. Yes, the Harris-Walz campaign finally put out their policy plank on their campaign website over the weekend. And Fox caught up with some House Democrats just today and asked them about some of these flip-flops, we can call them. Jamie Raskin saying this to Hillary Vaughn of Fox Business: "You can change your mind 1,000 times, and it would not even come close to J.D. Vance going from being a never Trumper to a forever Trumper here." Maxine Waters saying, "How do you compare that with the president who lies every day?" Tom, I got to ask, flip-flopping, is that just a natural element of American politics now? Should we not even be questioning it anymore? Is this baked in for voters that if it's politically advantageous, electorally advantageous, candidates going to shift their position on something eventually?
Yeah. Look, there is a science to debating. If you go through how the strategy teams approach nights like this, there's a couple of different lines of attacks. One is refutation. You can just flat out disagree, with your opponent. Another is correction, maybe kind of putting in context something they said. Another one is calling out contradictions. This is, part and parcel how politics works. If you're in a political debate with somebody and you think that you've identified something that they've said at one point and now changed at another point, yes, you're going to go after that point. Now, there is an argument to be made of evolution of thought, clearly, that, do you want an individual who is locked into one position and stays there forever? One of the things some of the Harris folks have told me when I've asked them about this is they say, well, look, you're pointing out something of Kamala Harris when she was running for president in one of the earliest Democratic primary debates, and I'm thinking about the border situation, decriminalization and stuff like that. Traditionally, candidates tend to run to the margins of their party in the primary session and then move to the center if they are then become the nominee. Harris never got that far. Remember, she dropped out of that primary race early on. So in her positioning herself as a progressive in that race, and remember, there were other progressives in that race as well, too. She said things back then that she's having to answer for now as a general election candidate in 2024 as the party nominee. So, in some ways, they're aware of this. They say they're prepared to deal with explaining this to the voters. But, the same can be said of Donald Trump, too, especially on this issue of abortion right now. Right. He's having a time with his own Republicans about exactly, where his position is. Is it moderating? Is it, getting more progressive? Where is he with this? Some Democrats have been some Republicans have been quite alarmed by what they see as some motion in Trump's position on abortion.
Yeah. What about Trump's attacks on Harris? He calls her Comrade Kamala. He has various nicknames also for Coach Walz as well. We can get into some of that here because the Trump campaign had to make also their own switcheroo in their focus of their strategy against a new candidate. How are they doing in that strategy? Has it been effective or have they struggled with it since she became the nominee?
Listen, I tell people all the time, I've interviewed the former president probably about maybe half a dozen times, especially most of those were when I worked in New Jersey on the Jersey Shore. Back then, he was a casino owner. We would go down and talk to Donald Trump about his casinos, and he would, identify other casino owners and start saying, they're washed up. Their hotels are no good. Nobody likes going to their places. When he came to the Washington, D.C. area with his golf club, he identified some of the most well-known golf courses in the D.C. area and said that they were falling apart and nobody liked them. Donald Trump picked that up and brought that into politics. These nicknames are nothing new. Remember, Little Marco and Jeb from the first time out in 2016. So, these are staples of Trump politics. So it should come as no surprise to anybody that, when he gets into these forums and these debates, he will take the gloves off. The question is, can Harris preempt that by maybe getting under his skin early on, getting him off his game a little bit? But remember, he didn't really have to do that against Joe Biden at all. One of the most memorable lines that came out of Trump in that first and only debate between him and Joe Biden was when Biden at one point had, kind of muffed an answer to a question. Trump looked at him and said, I don't know what he said there. I'm not sure he knows what he said there. And for a lot of folks, that crystallized that debate. And even though it was one moment, it was an important moment because Trump had enunciated things that a lot of people back at home who were watching that debate were thinking in that moment. So, the nicknames got a lot of attention. But, is it a moment that you can look at that debate where the person sitting in the chair in their living room at their home says, oh, see what he just said? I just thought that. And that's how you make the connection with the voters in these debates.
Tom, just lastly, let's talk about some of the debate parameters and rules here. There's not going to be a crowd. No. The mics will be muted. How do you like your debates, Tom Fitzgerald? I got to ask because I think it could be described that it's somewhat of a loss for the American voter that this is probably the only time we'll see them in a head-to-head matchup. There are no more debates between them scheduled. Usually in cycles we get at least 3 between the candidates. This is seemingly it here.
To answer your question, I've moderated debates. I like having a crowd in the room. I think it gives a life to the room, and if they want to cheer or clap, yes, the moderator's job, and my job has been in the past when I've had to moderate debates, to kind of calm that down to allow the debate to proceed. But as long as it's within reason, I think that adds something to a debate. It adds something to the candidate's energy level.
Okay.
I think it gives people a feel of how the things that these candidates are saying are being received in the room. Remember, when Lloyd Benson, and I'm going to date myself.
All right, we got to make it quick, Tom. We got to go soon.
Greg Patrick could probably go back further than me. But when Lloyd Benson looked at Dan Quayle and said, "You're no Jack Kennedy," there was an audible gasp in the room that nobody who watched that debate will ever forget. I think you learn something when you don't have people in the room.
All right, we'll look for those moments. Tom Fitzgerald, as always, can't thank you enough, and happy debate night. We'll see you.
All right.
All right, in the meantime, before we take our final commercial break of the hour, I just want to let you know that at least 10,000 of you have weighed in on this very question about which policy should the next president prioritize: the economy taking the cake, later followed by immigration, and then crime. So scan that QR code. We'll keep this question, this poll alive here. Speaking of polls, though, Tom and I were talking about how close it is between Harris and Trump. This is the Harvard-Harris poll out in the last few days. It's tied there. This is a national head-to-head matchup as well. We don't only have just the Harvard-Harris poll. We have other polls like the Times Siena poll that just came out over the weekend. Harris down by 1 over Trump. And then, of course, the RCP poll average. This is an average of polls there has Harris up over Trump just by 1 here. So let's take our final commercial break of the hour. Remember, we are moments away from the first presidential debate between Harris and Trump here. It will be simulcast on Live Now. Speaking of counter-programming, Tim Walz, the Minnesota governor, Harris's running mate, just took the stage there in Phoenix, Arizona. So we'll have that a little bit later on. We'll see everyone in 2 minutes. And welcome back here to Live Now from Fox. We are just moments away from the ABC News presidential debate. Let's check in with some of our reporters and colleagues there in the Media Filing Center in Philly, including Connor Hansen with Fox. He joins me. Connor, good to see you here. Happy debate night. What's the energy like in the room there?
Andrew, good to be with you. It's a very high energy atmosphere here inside the spin room. Just minutes away, as you mentioned, we're seeing politicians, surrogates, media everywhere coming through to do interviews. And this could not be a more high stakes evening, this debate between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. And it's actually the first night these two candidates will even meet in person. Security is tight in Philadelphia. Fencing and concrete barriers surround the National Constitution Center, and there's a heavy police presence as former President Donald Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris gear up for the most critical night of this election.
What you're going to see is the strength and the confidence of Vice President Harris.
He will be the clear winner, and people will see that we can't have 4 years of Kamala Harris.
Harris entered the race just 7 weeks ago after President Biden dropped out, giving her limited time to define her candidacy. Her campaign says tonight the vice president is focusing on policy.
She's going to talk about her plans to lower people's costs, her plans to take on grocery prices, her plans to build more housing in this country.
Trump won a coin toss and chose to give the final closing statement. The former president's team says he will portray a Harris administration as a continuation of Biden's presidency.
The most important thing that President Trump wants to get across is that we have extremely different policy ideas for the future of America.
There is mounting pressure on both candidates to perform, with national polling showing them virtually deadlocked in crucial swing states like Pennsylvania.
The voters have consistently said they care about the economy, they care about inflation, they care about the southern border.
And one of the next big questions we'll all be asking, will there be a repeat of tonight's debate? Right now, there's only one other scheduled before Election Day, and that's between the two vice presidential nominees, Governor Tim Walz and Senator J.D. Vance. Andrew.
Okay, Connor, that is literally one of my questions. Will we get to see them again in this format throughout the rest of this cycle? 55 days left to go before November the 5th here. So you're right, Connor. A lot is riding on what happens there on the stage tonight. Connor Hansen in Philly. Thanks so much. Talk soon.
Thanks, Andrew.
All right, in the meantime here, we are just about 2 minutes away from the ABC News presidential debate here. And remember, we had been talking about how we got to this moment, all that has transpired over the course of the last 3 months here, not only in the Biden administration, but also in the Trump campaign as well. You know it by now. It's been a hugely consequential and historic summer, not only with the assassination attempt against Donald Trump's life, not only with President Biden withdrawing from the top of the ticket, events that happen in the course of 10 days that normally don't happen in the course of a decade happened. We were here for those on Live Now from Fox, Live, Raw, and Unfiltered in the moment, bringing you the news in real time. As we will continue to do so after the debate, we'll be bringing on reporters and analysts and experts to talk about what we all just heard and what we all just saw here. We'll also be showing you some of the highlights, the reels, the clips from some of those viral moments that no doubt will probably be made there on the stage in Philadelphia. A gorgeous nighttime skyline view over the city of brotherly love. Of course, you know, that is where it all began. I've been saying so 250 years ago, the cradle of American democracy, the birthplace of American democracy. And so we are gearing up in just seconds as ABC News moderators David Muir and Lindsay Davis will kick it off. We've gone over some of the rules for the debate, and let's go out to Philadelphia, there at the National Constitution Center right now. All right, we kind of preempted here. We are waiting for some of the live pictures inside of the National Constitution Center with that shot there of the debate stage between Trump and Harris. Let's listen.
And former President Donald Trump. Their first face-to-face meeting in this presidential election, their first face-to-face meeting ever.
A historic race for president upended just weeks ago. President Biden withdrawing after his last debate. Donald Trump now up against a new opponent.
The candidates separated by the smallest of margins, essentially tied in the polls nationally and in the key battlegrounds, including right here in Pennsylvania, all still very much in play. The ABC News presidential debate starts right now.
This is an ABC News special, the most consequential moment of this campaign. Kamala Harris.
Together, we will chart a new way forward.
Donald Trump.
We will soon be a great nation again.
Face to face, historic. The ABC News presidential debate. Here now, David Muir and Lindsay Davis.
Good evening, I'm David Muir, and thank you for joining us for tonight's ABC News presidential debate. We want to welcome viewers watching on ABC and around the world tonight. Vice President Kamala Harris and President Donald Trump are just moments away from taking the stage in this unprecedented race for president.
And I'm Lindsay Davis. Tonight's meeting could be the most consequential event of their campaigns, with Election Day now less than 2 months away. For Vice President Kamala Harris, this is her first debate since President Biden withdrew from the race on July 21st. Of course, that decision followed his debate against President Donald Trump in June. Since then, this race has taken on an entirely new dynamic.
And that brings us to the rules of tonight's debate. 90 minutes with 2 commercial breaks. No topics or questions have been shared with the campaigns. The candidates will have 2 minutes to answer questions, and this is the clock. That's what they'll be seeing. 2 minutes for rebuttals and 1 minute for follow-ups, clarifications, or responses. Their microphones will only be turned on when it's their turn to speak. No pre-written notes allowed. There is no audience here tonight in this hall at the National Constitution Center. This is an intimate setting for 2 candidates who have never met.
President Trump won the coin toss. He chose to deliver the final closing statement of the evening. Vice President Harris selected the podium to the right.
So let's now welcome the candidates to the stage. Vice President Kamala Harris and President Donald Trump.
Kamala Harris. Let's have a good debate.
Nice to see you. Have fun.
Thank you.
Welcome to you both. It's wonderful to have you. It's an honor to have you both here tonight.
Good evening. We are looking forward to a spirited and thoughtful debate.
So let's get started. I want to begin tonight with the issue that voters repeatedly say is their number one issue, and that is the economy and the cost of living in this country. Vice President Harris, you and President Trump were elected 4 years ago, and your opponent on the stage here tonight often asks his supporters, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? When it comes to the economy, do you believe Americans are better off than they were 4 years ago?
So I was raised as a middle-class kid, and I am actually the only person on this stage who has a plan that is about lifting up the middle class and working people of America. I believe in the ambition, the aspirations, the dreams of the American people. And that is why I imagine and have actually a plan to build what I call an opportunity economy. Because here's the thing. We know that we have a shortage of homes and housing, and the cost of housing is too expensive for far too many people. We know that young families need support to raise their children, and I intend on extending a tax cut for those families of $6,000, which is the largest child tax credit that we have given in a long time, so that those young families can afford to buy a crib, buy a car seat, buy clothes for their children. My passion, one of them, is small businesses. My mother raised my sister and me, but there was a woman who helped raise us. We call her our second mother. She was a small business owner. I love our small businesses. My plan is to give a $50,000 tax deduction to start up small businesses, knowing they are part of the backbone of America's economy. My opponent, on the other hand, his plan is to do what he has done before, which is to provide a tax cut for billionaires and big corporations, which will result in $5 trillion to America's deficit. My opponent has a plan that I call the Trump's sales tax, which would be a 20% tax on everyday goods that you rely on to get through the month. Economists have said that Trump sales tax would actually result for middle-class families in about $4,000 more a year, because of his policies and his ideas about what should be the backs of middle-class people paying for tax cuts for billionaires.
President Trump, I'll give you 2 minutes.
First of all, I have no sales tax. That's an incorrect statement. She knows that. We're doing tariffs on other countries. Other countries are going to finally, after 75 years, pay us back for all that we've done for the world. And the tariff will be substantial in some cases. I took in billions and billions of dollars, as you know, from China. In fact, they never took the tariff off because there was so much money they can't. It would totally destroy everything that they've set out to do. They're taking in billions of dollars from China and other places. They've left the tariffs on. When I had it, I had tariffs, and yet I had no inflation. Look, we've had a terrible economy because inflation which is really known as a country buster. It breaks up countries. We have inflation like very few people have ever seen before, probably the worst in our nation's history. we were at 21%, but that's being generous because many things are 50, 60, 70, and 80% higher than they were just a few years ago. This has been a disaster for people, for the middle class, but for every class. On top of that, we have millions of people pouring into our country from prisons and jails, from mental institutions and insane asylums, and they're coming in and they're taking jobs that are occupied right now by African Americans and Hispanics, and also unions. Unions are going to be affected very soon. And you see what's happening. You see what's happening with towns throughout the United States. You look at Springfield, Ohio. You look at Aurora in Colorado. They are taking over the towns. They're taking over buildings. They're going in violently. These are the people that she and Biden led into our country, and they're destroying our country. They're dangerous. They're at the highest level of criminality, and we have to get them out. We have to get them out fast. I created one of the greatest economies in the history of our country. I'll do it again and even better.
We are going to get to immigration and border security during this debate, but I would like to let Vice President Harris respond on the economy here.
Well, I would love to. Let's talk about what Donald Trump left us. Donald Trump left us the worst unemployment since the Great Depression. Donald Trump left us the worst public health epidemic in a century. Donald Trump left us the worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War. And what we have done is clean up Donald Trump's mess. What we have done and what I intend to do is build on what we know are the aspirations and the hopes of the American people. But I'm going to tell you all in this debate tonight, you're going to hear from the same old tired playbook, a bunch of lies, grievances, and name-calling. What you're going to hear tonight is a detailed and dangerous plan called Project 2025 that the former president intends on implementing if he were elected again. I believe very strongly that the American people want a president who understands the importance of bringing us together, knowing we have so much more in common than what separates us. And I pledge to you to be a president for all Americans.
President Trump will give you a minute here to respond.
Number one, I have nothing to do, as you know, and as she knows better than anyone, I have nothing to do with Project 2025. That's out there. I haven't read it. I don't want to read it purposely. I'm not going to read it. This was a group of people that got together. They came up with some ideas, I guess some good, some bad. But it makes no difference. I have nothing to do. Everybody knows I'm an open book. Everybody knows what I'm going to do. Cut taxes very substantially and create a great economy like I did before. We had the greatest economy. We got hit with a pandemic. And the pandemic was not since 1917, where 100 million people died, has there been anything like it. We did a phenomenal job with the pandemic. We handed them over a country where the economy and where the stock market was higher than it was before the pandemic came in. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. We made ventilators for the entire world. We got gowns, we got masks, we did things that nobody thought possible. And people give me credit for rebuilding the military. They give me credit for a lot of things, but not enough credit for the great job we did with the pandemic. But the only jobs they got were bounce back jobs. These were jobs bounced back, and it bounced back and it went to their benefit. But I was the one that created them. They know it, and so does everybody else.
Vice President Harris, I'll let you respond.
So Donald Trump has no plan for you. And when you look at his economic plan, it's all about tax breaks for the richest people. I am offering what I describe as an opportunity economy, and the best economists in our country, if not the world, have reviewed our relative plans for the future of America. What Goldman Sachs has said is that Donald Trump's plan would make the economy worse. Mine would strengthen the economy. What the Wharton School has said is Donald Trump's plan would actually explode the deficit. 16 Nobel laureates have described his economic plan as something that would increase inflation and by the middle of next year would invite a recession. You just have to look at where we are and where we stand on the issues. And I'd invite you to know that Donald Trump actually has no plan for you because he is more interested in defending himself than he is in looking out for you.
That's just a soundbite. They gave her that to say. Look, I went to the Wharton School of Finance, and many of those professors, the top professors, think my plan is a brilliant plan. It's a great plan. It's a plan that's going to bring up our worth, our value as a country. It's going to make people want to be able to go and work and create jobs and create a lot of good, solid money for our country. And just to finish off, she doesn't have a plan. She copied Biden's plan, and it's like 4 sentences, like run, spot, run. 4 sentences that are just, oh, we'll try and lower taxes. She doesn't have a plan. Take a look at her plan. She doesn't have a plan.
Mr. President, I do want to drill down on something you both brought up. The Vice President brought up your tariffs. You responded, and let's drill down on this, because your plan is what she calls is essentially a national sales tax. Your proposal calls for tariffs, as you pointed out here, on foreign imports across the board. You recently said that you might double your plan, imposing tariffs up to 20% on goods coming into this country. As you know, many economists say that with tariffs at that level, costs are then passed on to the consumer. Vice President Harris has argued it'll mean higher prices on gas, food, clothing, medication, arguing it costs the typical family nearly $4,000 a year. Do you believe Americans can afford higher prices because of tariffs?
They're not going to have higher prices. What's going to have, and who's going to have higher prices, is China and all of the countries that have been ripping us off for years. I was the only president ever. China was paying us hundreds of billions of dollars, and so were other countries. And, you know, if she doesn't like them, they should have gone out and they should have immediately cut the tariffs. But those tariffs are there 3.5 years now under their administration. We are going to take in billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars. I had no inflation, virtually no inflation. They had the highest inflation perhaps in the history of our country, because I've never seen a worse period of time. People can't go out and buy cereal or bacon or eggs or anything else. The people of our country are absolutely dying with what they've done. They've destroyed the economy. And all you have to do is look at a poll. The polls say 80 and 85 and even 90% that the Trump economy was great, that their economy was terrible.
Vice President Harris, I do want to ask for your response, and you heard what the president said there, because the Biden administration did keep a number of the Trump tariffs in place. So how do you respond?
Well, let's be clear that the Trump administration resulted in a trade deficit, one of the highest we've ever seen in the history of America. He invited trade wars. You want to talk about his deal with China? What he ended up doing is, under Donald Trump's presidency, he ended up selling American chips to China to help them improve and modernize their military, basically sold us out, when a policy about China should be in making sure the United States of America wins the competition for the 21st century, which means focusing on the details of what that requires, focusing on relationships with our allies, focusing on investing in American-based technology so that we win the race on AI, on quantum computing, focusing on what we need to do to support America's workforce so that we don't end up having on the short end of the stick in terms of workers' rights. But what Donald Trump did, let's talk about this, with COVID, is he actually thanked President Xi for what he did during COVID. Look at his tweet. Thank you, President Xi, exclamation point, when we know that Xi was responsible for lacking and not giving us transparency about the origins of COVID.
President Trump, I'll let you respond.
First of all, they bought their chips from Taiwan. We hardly make chips anymore because of philosophies like they have and policies like they have. I don't say her because she has no policy. Everything that she believed 3 years ago and 4 years ago is out the window. She's going to my philosophy now. In fact, I was going to send her a MAGA hat. She's gone to my philosophy. But if she ever got elected, she'd change it. And it will be the end of our country. She's a Marxist. Everybody knows she's a Marxist. Her father's a Marxist professor in economics, and he taught her well. But when you look at what she's done to our country, and when you look at these millions and millions of people that are pouring into our country monthly, where it's, I believe, 21 million people, not the 15 that people say, and I think it's a lot higher than the 21. That's bigger than New York State pouring in. And just look at what they're doing to our country. They're criminals. Many of these people coming in are criminals. And that's bad for our economy, too. You know, you mentioned before, we'll talk about immigration later. Well, bad immigration is the worst thing that can happen to our economy. They have, and she has, destroyed our country with policy that's insane. Almost policy that you'd say they have to hate our country.
President Trump, thank you. Lindsay?
I want to turn to the issue of abortion. President Trump, you've often touted that you were able to kill Roe v. Wade. Last year, you said that you were proud to be the most pro-life president in American history. Then last month, you said that your administration would be great for women and their reproductive rights. In your home state of Florida, you surprised many with regard to your 6-week abortion ban because you initially had said that it was too short. And you said, quote, I'm going to be voting that we need more than 6 weeks. But then the very next day, you reversed course and said you would vote to support the 6-week ban. Vice President Harris says that women shouldn't trust you on the issue of abortion because you've changed your position so many times. Therefore, why should they trust you?
Well, the reason I'm doing that vote is because the plan is, as you know, the vote is, they have abortion in the 9th month. They even have, and you can look at the governor of West Virginia, the previous governor of West Virginia, not the current governor, who's doing an excellent job, but the governor before, he said the baby will be born and we will decide what to do with the baby. In other words, we'll execute the baby. And that's why I did that, because that predominates, because they're radical. The Democrats are radical in that. And her vice presidential pick, which I think was a horrible pick, by the way, for our country, because he is really out of it. But her vice presidential pick says abortion in the 9th month is absolutely fine. He also says execution after birth. It's execution, no longer abortion, because the baby is born, is okay. And that's not okay with me, hence the vote. But what I did is something for 52 years. They've been trying to get Roe v. Wade into the states. And through the genius and heart and strength of 6 Supreme Court justices, we were able to do that. Now, I believe in the exceptions for rape, incest, and life of the mother. I believe strongly in it. Ronald Reagan did also. 85% of Republicans do. Exceptions. Very important. But we were able to get it, and now states are voting on it. And for the first time, you're going to see, look, this is an issue that's torn our country apart for 52 years. Every legal scholar, every Democrat, every Republican, liberal, conservative, they all wanted this issue to be brought back to the states where the people could vote. And that's what happened. Now, Ohio, the vote was somewhat liberal. Kansas, the vote was somewhat liberal, much more liberal than people would have thought. But each individual state is voting. It's the vote of the people now. It's not tied up in the federal government. I did a great service in doing it. It took courage to do it. And the Supreme Court had great courage in doing it. And I give tremendous credit to those 6 justices.
There is no state in this country where it is legal to kill a baby after it's born. Madam Vice President, I want to get your response to President Trump.
Well, as I said, you're going to hear a bunch of lies, and that's not actually a surprising fact. Let's understand how we got here. Donald Trump hand-selected 3 members of the United States Supreme Court with the intention that they would undo the protections of Roe v. Wade. And they did exactly as he intended. And now in over 20 states, there are Trump abortion bans, which make it criminal for a doctor or nurse to provide health care. In one state, it provides prison for life. Trump abortion bans that make no exception even for rape and incest, which understand what that means. A survivor of a crime of violation to their body does not have the right to make a decision about what happens to their body next. That is immoral. And one does not have to abandon their faith or deeply held beliefs to agree. The government, and Donald Trump certainly, should not be telling a woman what to do with her body. I have talked with women around our country. You want to talk about this is what people wanted? Pregnant women who want to carry a pregnancy to term, suffering from a miscarriage, being denied care in an emergency room because the healthcare providers are afraid they might go to jail, and she's bleeding out in a car in the parking lot. She didn't want that. Her husband didn't want that. A 12 or 13-year-old survivor of incest being forced to carry a pregnancy to term. They don't want that. And I pledge to you, when Congress passes a bill to put back in place the protections of Roe v. Wade. As President of the United States, I will proudly sign it into law. But understand, if Donald Trump were to be reelected, he will sign a national abortion ban. Understand, in his Project 2025, there would be a national abortion, a monitor that would be monitoring your pregnancies, your miscarriages. I think the American people believe that certain freedoms, in particular the freedom to make decisions about one's own body, should not be made by the government.
Thank you, Vice President Harris.
Well, there she goes again. It's a lie. I'm not signing a ban, and there's no reason to sign a ban, because we've gotten what everybody wanted. Democrats, Republicans, and everybody else, and every legal scholar wanted it to be brought back into the states, and the states are voting. And it may take a little time, but for 52 years, this issue has torn our country apart, and they've wanted it back in the states. And I did something that nobody thought was possible. The states are now voting. What she says is an absolute lie. And as far as the abortion ban, no, I'm not in favor of abortion ban, but it doesn't matter, because this issue has now been taken over by the states.
Would you veto a national abortion ban if it came to your desk?
Well, I won't have to, because, again, two things. Number one, she said she'll go back to Congress. She'll never get the vote. It's impossible for her to get the vote, especially now with the 50-50, and essentially 50-50 in both Senate and the House. She's not going to get the vote. She can't get the vote. She won't even come close to it. So it's just talk. You know what it reminds me of? When they said they're going to get student loans terminated, and it ended up being a total catastrophe. The student loans, and then her, I think probably her boss, if you call him a boss, he spends all his time on the beach. But look, her boss went out and said, we'll do it again. We'll do it a different way. And he went out, got rejected again by the Supreme Court. So all these students got taunted with this whole thing about this whole idea, and how unfair that would have been. Part of the reason they lost, to the millions and millions of people that had to pay off their student loans. They didn't get it for free, but they were saying it's the same way that they talked about that they talk about abortion.
But if I could just get a yes or no, because your running mate, J.D. Vance, has said that you would veto if it did come to your desk.
Well, I didn't discuss it with J.D. In all fairness, J.D., and I don't mind if he has a certain view, but I think he was speaking for me, but I really didn't. Look, we don't have to discuss it, because she'd never be able to get it, just like she couldn't get student loans. They couldn't get student loans. They didn't even come close to getting student loans. They taunted young people and a lot of other people that had loans. They can never get this approved. So it doesn't matter what she says about going to Congress. So wonderful. Let's go to Congress, do it. But the fact is that for years they wanted to get it out of Congress and out of the federal government, and we did something that everybody said couldn't be done. And now you have a vote of the people on abortion.
Vice President Harris, I want to give you your time to respond, but I do want to ask, would you support any restrictions on a woman's right to an abortion?
I absolutely support reinstating the protections of Roe v. Wade. And as you rightly mentioned, nowhere in America is a woman carrying a pregnancy to term and asking for an abortion. That is not happening. It's insulting to the women of America. And understand what has been happening under Donald Trump's abortion bans. Couples who pray and dream of having a family are being denied IVF treatments. What is happening in our country? Working people, working women who are working one or two jobs, who can barely afford child care as it is, have to travel to another state
when they got it,
to get on a plane sitting next to strangers, to go and get the health care she needs. Barely can afford to do it, and what you are putting her through is unconscionable. And the people of America have not, the majority of Americans believe in a woman's right to make decisions about her own body. And that is why in every state where this issue has been on the ballot, in red and blue states both, the people of America have voted for freedom.
Vice President Harris,
excuse me, I have to respond. Another lie. It's another lie. I have been a leader on IVF, which is fertilization. The IVF, I have been a leader. In fact, when they got a very negative decision on IVF from the Alabama courts, I saw the people of Alabama and the legislature 2 days later voted it in. I've been a leader on it. They know that, and everybody else knows it. I have been a leader on fertilization, IVF. And the other thing, they you should ask, will she allow abortion in the 8th month, 9th month, 7th month?
Come on.
Okay, would you do that? Why don't you ask her that question?
Why don't you answer the question? Would you
because
veto?
Under Roe v. Wade,
answer the question. Would you veto?
You could do abortions in the 7th month, the 8th month, the 9th month,
not true.
and probably after birth. Just look at the former governor of Virginia. The governor of Virginia said, we put the baby aside and then we determine what we want to do with the baby.
President Trump, thank you.
We're going to turn now to immigration and border security. We know it's an issue that's important to Republicans, Democrats, voters across the board in this country. Vice President Harris, you were tasked by President Biden with getting to the root causes of migration from Central America. We know that illegal border crossings reached a record high in the Biden administration. This past June, President Biden imposed tough new asylum restrictions. We know the numbers since then have dropped significantly. But my question to you tonight is, why did the administration wait until 6 months before the election to act? And would you have done anything differently from President Biden on this?
So I'm the only person on this stage who has prosecuted transnational criminal organizations for the trafficking of guns, drugs, and human beings. And let me say that the United States Congress, including some of the most conservative members of the United States Senate, came up with a border security bill which I supported. And that bill would have put 1,500 more border agents on the border to help those folks who are working there right now overtime trying to do their job. It would have allowed us to stem the flow of fentanyl coming into the United States. I know there are so many families watching tonight who have been personally affected by the surge of fentanyl in our country. That bill would have put more resources to allow us to prosecute transnational criminal organizations for trafficking in guns, drugs, and human beings. But you know what happened to that bill? Donald Trump got on the phone, called up some folks in Congress, and said, kill the bill. And you know why? Because he'd prefer to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem. And understand, this comes at a time where the people of our country actually need a leader who engages in solutions, who actually addresses the problems at hand. But what we have in the former president is someone who would prefer to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem. And I'll tell you something, he's going to talk about immigration a lot tonight, even when it's not the subject that is being raised. And I'm going to actually do something really unusual, and I'm going to invite you to attend one of Donald Trump's rallies, because it's a really interesting thing to watch. You will see during the course of his rallies, he talks about fictional characters like Hannibal Lecter. He will talk about windmills cause cancer. And what you will also notice is that people start leaving his rallies early out of exhaustion and boredom. And I will tell you, the one thing you will not hear him talk about is you. You will not hear him talk about your needs, your dreams, and your desires. And I'll tell you, I believe you deserve a president who actually puts you first, and I pledge to you that I will.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump, on that point, I want to get your response.
Well, I would like to respond.
Let me just ask, though, why did you try to kill that bill, and successfully so, that would have put thousands of additional agents and officers on the border?
First, let me respond as to the rallies. She said people start leaving. People don't go to her rallies. There's no reason to go. And the people that do go, she's bussing them in and paying them to be there, and then showing them in a different light. So she can't talk about that. People don't leave my rallies. We have the biggest rallies, the most incredible rallies in the history of politics. That's because people want to take their country back. Our country is being lost. We're a failing nation. And it happened 3.5 years ago. And what's going on here, you're going to end up in World War III, just to go into another subject. What they have done to our country by allowing these millions and millions of people to come into our country, and look at what's happening to the towns all over the United States. And a lot of towns don't want to talk. It's not going to be Aurora or Springfield. A lot of towns don't want to talk about it because they're so embarrassed by it. In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there. And this is what's happening in our country, and it's a shame. As far as rallies are concerned, as far as the reason they go is they like what I say. They want to bring our country back. They want to make America great again. It's a very simple phrase, make America great again. She's destroying this country, and if she becomes president, this country doesn't have a chance of success. Not only success, we'll end up being Venezuela on steroids.
I just want to clarify here. You bring up Springfield, Ohio, and ABC News did reach out to the city manager there. He told us there have been no credible reports of specific claims of pets being harmed, injured, or abused by individuals within the immigrant community.
Well, I've seen people on television.
Let me just say here, this is the
people on television say my dog was taken and used for food. So maybe he said that, and maybe that's a good thing to say for a city manager.
I'm not taking this from
but
television.
The people
I'm taking it from the city manager.
Their dog was eaten by the people that went there.
Again, the Springfield city manager says there's no evidence of that. Vice President Harris, I'll let you respond to the rest of what you've heard.
You talk about extreme. This is, I think, one of the reasons why in this election I actually have the endorsement of 200 Republicans who have formerly worked with President Bush, Mitt Romney, and John McCain, including the endorsement of former Vice President Dick Cheney and Congress member Liz Cheney. And if you want to really know the inside track on who the former president is, if he didn't make it clear already, just ask people who have worked with him. His former chief of staff, a 4-star general, has said he has contempt for the Constitution of the United States. His former national security advisor has said he is dangerous and unfit. His former Secretary of Defense has said the nation, the Republic, would never survive another Trump term. And when we listen to this kind of rhetoric, when the issues that affect the American people are not being addressed, I think the choice is clear in this election.
President Trump, I'll give you a quick minute to respond here.
Thank you, because when I hear that, see, I'm a different kind of a person. I fired most of those people. Not so graciously. They did bad things or a bad job. I fired them. They never fired one person. They didn't fire anybody having to do with Afghanistan and the Taliban and the 13 people whose were just killed, viciously and violently killed. And I got to know the parents and the family. They didn't fire. They should have fired all those generals, all those top people, because that was one of the most incompetently handled situations anybody has ever seen. So when somebody does a bad job, I fire him. And you take a guy like Esper. He was no good. I fired him. So he writes a book. Another one writes a book. Because with me, they can write books. With nobody else can they. But they have done such a poor job, and they never fire anybody. Look at the economy. Look at the inflation. They didn't fire any of their economists. They have the same people. That's a good way not to have books written about you. But just to finish, I got more votes than any Republican in history by far. In fact, I got more votes than any president, sitting president in history by far.
Let me continue on immigration. It was what you wanted to talk about earlier, so let's get back to your deportation proposal that the vice president has reacted to as well. President Trump, you call this the largest domestic deportation operation in the history of our country. You say you would use the National Guard. You say if things get out of control, you'd have no problem using the U.S. military.
Police, yes.
You also said you would use local police. How would you deport 11 million undocumented immigrants? I know you believe that number is much higher. Take us through this. What does this look like? Will authorities be going door to door in this country?
Yeah, it is much higher because of them. They allowed criminals, many millions of criminals. They allowed terrorists. They allowed common street criminals. They allowed people to come in, drug dealers, to come into our country. And they're now in the United States and told by their countries like Venezuela, don't ever come back or we're going to kill you. Do you know that crime in Venezuela and crime in countries all over the world is way down? You know why? Because they've taken their criminals off the street and they've given them to her to put into our country. And this will be one of the greatest mistakes in history for them to allow. And I think they probably did it because they think they're going to get votes, but it's not worth it because they're destroying the fabric of our country by what they've done. There's never been anything done like this at all. They've destroyed the fabric of our country. Millions of people let in. And all over the world, crime is down. All over the world except here. Crime here is up and through the roof. Despite their fraudulent statements that they made, crime in this country is through the roof. And we have a new form of crime. It's called migrant crime. And it's happening at levels that nobody thought possible.
President Trump, as you know, the FBI says overall violent crime is actually coming down in this country. But
Excuse me,
Harris,
the FBI they were defrauding statements. They didn't include the worst cities. They didn't include the cities with the worst crime. It was a fraud, just like their number of 818,000 jobs that they said they created turned out to be a fraud.
President Trump, thank you. I'll let you respond, Vice President Harris.
Well, I think this is so rich, coming from someone who has been prosecuted for national security crimes, economic crimes, election interference, has been found liable for sexual assault, and his next big court appearance is in November at his own criminal sentencing. And let's be clear where each person stands on the issue of what is important about respect for the rule of law and respect for law enforcement. The former vice president called for defunding federal law enforcement, 45,000 agents, get this, on the day after he was arraigned on 34 felony counts. So let's talk about what is important in this race. It is important that we move forward, that we turn the page on this same old tired rhetoric and address the needs of the American people, address what we need to do about the housing shortage, which I have a plan for, address what we must do to support our small businesses, address bringing down the price of groceries. But frankly, the American people are exhausted with this same old tired playbook.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
Excuse me. Every one of those cases was started by them against their political opponent. And I'm winning most of them, and I will win the rest on appeal. And you saw that with the decision that came down just recently from the Supreme Court. I'm winning most of them. But those are cases, it's called weaponization. Never happened in this country. They weaponized the Justice Department. Every one of those cases was involved with the DOJ, from Atlanta and Fani Willis to the Attorney General of New York and the DA in New York. Every one of those cases. And then they say, oh, he's a criminal. They're the ones that made them go after me. By the way, Joe Biden was found essentially guilty on the documents case. And what happened in my documents case? They said, oh, that's the toughest of them all. A complete and total victory. 2 months ago, it was thrown out. It's weaponization, and they used it, and it's never happened in this country. They used it to try and win an election. They're fake cases.
President Trump, thank you. A really quick response here, Vice President Harris, on this notion of weaponization of the Justice Department.
Well, let's talk about extreme and understand the context in which this election in 2024 is taking place. The United States Supreme Court recently ruled that the former president would essentially be immune from any misconduct if he were to enter the White House again. Understand, this is someone who has openly said he would terminate, I'm quoting, terminate the Constitution of the United States, that he would weaponize the Department of Justice against his political enemies. Someone who has openly expressed disdain for members of our military. Understand what it would mean if Donald Trump were back in the White House with no guardrails, because certainly we know now the court won't stop him. We know J.D. Vance is not going to stop him. It's up to the American people
Vice President
to stop
Harris,
him.
Thank you. Lindsay?
Vice President Harris, in your last run for president.
This is the one that weaponized, not me. She weaponized. I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me. They talk about democracy. I'm a threat to democracy. They're the threat to democracy with a fake Russia investigation
we do have a lot
that went nowhere.
We have a lot to get to. Lindsay?
Vice President Harris, in your last run for president, you said you wanted to ban fracking. Now you don't. You wanted mandatory government buyback programs for assault weapons. Now your campaign says you don't. You supported decriminalizing border crossings. Now you're taking a harder line. I know you say that your values have not changed. So then why have so many of your policy positions changed?
So my values have not changed, and I'm going to discuss every one of at least every point that you've made. But in particular, let's talk about fracking, because we're here in Pennsylvania. I made that very clear in 2020. I will not ban fracking. I have not banned fracking as Vice President of the United States. And in fact, I was the tie-breaking vote on the Inflation Reduction Act, which opened new leases for fracking. My position is that we have got to invest in diverse sources of energy so we reduce our reliance on foreign oil. We have had the largest increase in domestic oil production in history because of an approach that recognizes that we cannot over-rely on foreign oil. As it relates to my values, let me tell you, I grew up a middle-class kid raised by a hardworking mother who worked and saved and was able to buy our first home when I was a teenager. The values I bring to the importance of home ownership, knowing not everybody got handed $400 million on a silver platter and then filed bankruptcy 6 times, is a value that I bring to my work to say we are going to work with the private sector and home builders to increase 3 million homes, increase by 3 million homes by the end of my first term. My work that is related to having a friend when I was in high school who was sexually assaulted by her stepfather. And my focus then on protecting women and children from violent crime is based on a value that is deeply grounded in the importance of standing up for those who are most vulnerable. My work that is about protecting Social Security and Medicare is based on long-standing work that I have done, protecting seniors from scams. My values have not changed. And what is important is that there is a president who actually brings values and a perspective that is about lifting people up and not beating people down and name-calling. The true measure of the leader is the leader who actually understands the strength is not in beating people down, it's in lifting people up. I intend to be that president.
President Trump, your response?
First of all, I wasn't given $400 million. I wish I was. My father was a Brooklyn builder, Brooklyn, Queens, and a great father, and I learned a lot from him. But I was given a fraction of that, a tiny fraction, and I built it into many, many billions of dollars, many, many billions. And when people see it, they are even surprised. So we don't have to talk about that. Fracking, she's been against it for 12 years. Defund the police, she's been against that forever. She gave all that stuff up very wrongly, very horribly, and everybody's laughing at it, okay? They're all laughing at it. She gave up at least 12 and probably 14 or 15 different policies. Like, she was big on defund the police. In Minnesota, she went out, wait a minute, I'm talking now, if you don't mind, please. Does that sound familiar? She went out in Minnesota and wanted to let criminals that killed people, that burned down Minneapolis, she went out and raised money to get them out of jail. She did things that nobody would ever think of. Now she wants to do transgender operations on illegal aliens that are in prison. This is a radical left liberal that would do this. She wants to confiscate your guns, and she will never allow fracking in Pennsylvania. If she won the election, fracking in Pennsylvania will end on day one. Just to finish, one thing so important in my opinion. So I got the oil business going like nobody has ever done before. When they took over, they got rid of it, started getting rid of it, and the prices were going up the roof. They immediately let these guys go to where they were. I would have been 5 times, 4 times, 5 times higher, because you're talking about 3.5 years ago. They got it up to where I was because they had no choice, because the prices of energy were quadrupling and doubling. You saw what happened to gasoline. So they said, let's go back to Trump. But if she won the election, the day after that election, they'll go back to destroying our country, and oil will be dead, fossil fuel will be dead, we'll go back to windmills, and we'll go back to solar, where they need a whole desert to get some energy to come out of. You ever see a solar plant? By the way, I'm a big fan of solar, but they take 400, 500 acres of desert
President
soil.
Trump, we have a
These
lot
are
of
not good
issues
things
that
for
we
the
have to get
environment,
to.
as she
We're out of time.
understands.
Thank you.
Lindsay, thank you. We have an election in just 56 days. And I want to talk about the peaceful transfer of power, which, of course, we all know is a cornerstone of our democracy, and the role of a president in a moment of crisis. Mr. President, on January 6th, you told your supporters to march to the Capitol. You said you would be right there with them. The country and the world saw what played out at the Capitol that day, the officers coming under attack. Aides in the West Wing say you watched it unfold on television off the Oval Office. You did send out tweets, but it was more than 2 hours before you sent out that video message telling your supporters to go home. Is there anything you regret about what you did on that day?
You just said a thing that isn't covered. Peacefully and patriotically, I said during my speech, not later on. peacefully and patriotically. And nobody on the other side was killed. Ashley Babbitt was shot by an out-of-control police officer that should have never, ever shot her. It's a disgrace. But we didn't do this group of people that have been treated so badly. I ask, what about all the people that are pouring into our country and killing people that she allowed to pour in? She was the border czar, remember that. She was the border czar. She doesn't want to be called the border czar because she's embarrassed by the border. In fact, she said at the beginning, oh, I'm surprised you're not talking about the border yet. That's because she knows what a bad job they've done. What about those people? When are they going to be prosecuted? When are these people from countries all over the world, not just South America? They're coming in from all over the world, David, all over the world, and crime rates are down all over the world because of it.
But let me just ask you,
David, when are those people going to be prosecuted? When are the people that burned down Minneapolis going to be prosecuted? Or in Seattle? They went into Seattle. They took over a big percentage of the city of Seattle. When are those people going to be prosecuted?
But let me just ask
you. You might ask her that question.
You were the president. You were watching it unfold on television. It's a very simple question as we move forward toward another election. Is there anything you regret about what you did on that day? Yes or no?
I had nothing to do with that other than they asked me to make a speech. I showed up for a speech. I said, I think it's going to be big. I went to Nancy Pelosi and the mayor of Washington, D.C., and the mayor put it back in writing, as you know. I said, you know, this is going to be a very big rally or whatever you want to call it. And again, it wasn't done by me. It was done by others. I said, I'd like to give you 10,000 National Guard or soldiers. They rejected me. Nancy Pelosi rejected me. It was just 2 weeks ago. Her daughter has a tape of her saying she is fully responsible for what happened. They want to get rid of that tape. It would have never happened if Nancy Pelosi and the mayor of Washington did their jobs. I wasn't responsible for security. Nancy Pelosi was responsible. She didn't do her job.
The question was about you as president, not about former Speaker Pelosi, but I do want Vice President Harris to respond here.
I was at the Capitol on January 6th. I was the vice president-elect. I was also an acting senator. I was there. And on that day, the President of the United States incited a violent mob to attack our nation's capital, to desecrate our nation's capital. On that day, 140 law enforcement officers were injured, and some died. And understand, the former president has been indicted and impeached for exactly that reason. But this is not an isolated situation. Let's remember Charlottesville, where there was a mob of people carrying tiki torches, spewing anti-Semitic hate. And what did the president then at the time say? There were fine people on each side. Let's remember that when it came to the Proud Boys, a militia, the president said, the former president said, stand back and stand by. So for everyone watching who remembers what January 6th was, I say, we don't have to go back. Let's not go back. We're not going back. It's time to turn the page. And if that was a bridge too far for you, well, there is a place in our campaign for you to stand for country, to stand for our democracy, to stand for rule of law, and to end the chaos, and to end the approach that is about attacking the foundations of our democracy because you don't like the outcome. And be clear on that point. Donald Trump, the candidate, has said in this election there will be a bloodbath if this and the outcome of this election is not to his liking. Let's turn the page on this. Let's not go back. Let's chart a course for the future and not go backwards to the past.
Let me just follow up here.
It was a different term, and it was a term that related to energy because they have destroyed our energy business. That was where bloodbath was. Also, on Charlottesville, that story has been, as you would say, debunked. Laura Ingraham, Sean Hannity, Jesse, all of these people, they covered it. If they go an extra sentence, they will see it was perfect. It was debunked in almost every newspaper, but they still bring it up, just like they bring 2025 up. They bring all of this stuff up. I ask you this. You talk about the Capitol. Why are we allowing these millions of people to come through on the southern border. How come she's not doing anything? And I'll tell you what I would do, and I would be very proud to do it. I would say we would both leave this debate right now. I'd like to see her go down to Washington, D.C. during this debate, because we're wasting a lot of time. Go down to, because she's been so bad, it's so ridiculous. Go down to Washington, D.C. and let her sign a bill to close up the border, because they have the right to do it. They don't need bills. They have the right to do it. The President of the United States, you'll get him out of bed, you'll wake him up at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, you'll say, come on down to the office, let's sign a bill. If he signs a bill that the border is closed, all he has to do is say it to the Border Patrol, who are phenomenal. If they do that, the border is closed.
Mr.
Those
President,
people are killing many people, unlike J6.
We talked immigration here tonight. I do want to focus on this next issue to both of you, because it really brings us this into focus, truth in these times that we're living in. Mr. President, for 3.5 years after you lost the 2020 election, you repeatedly falsely claimed that you won, many times saying you won in a landslide. In the past couple of weeks leading up to this debate, you have said, quote, you lost by a whisker, that you, quote, didn't quite make it, that you came up a little bit short.
I said that?
Are you now acknowledging that you lost in 2020?
No, I don't acknowledge that at all.
But
I
you
said
did
that
say
sarcastically.
That.
You know that. It was said, oh, we lost by a whisker. That was said sarcastically. Look, there's so much proof. All you have to do is look at it. And they should have sent it back to the legislatures for approval. I got almost 75 million votes, the most votes any sitting president has ever gotten. I was told if I got 63, which was what I got in 2016, you can't be beaten. The election, people should never be thinking about it. An election is fraudulent. We need two things. We need walls, and we have to have it. We have to have borders, and we have to have good elections. Our elections are bad. And a lot of these illegal immigrants coming in, they're trying to get them to vote. They can't even speak English. They don't even know what country they're in practically. And these people are trying to get them to vote. And that's why they're allowing them to come into our country.
I did watch all of these pieces of video. I didn't detect the sarcasm, lost by a whisker. We didn't quite make it. And we should just point out here as clarification, and you know this, you and your allies, 60 cases in front of many judges, many of them
no
Republican.
Judge looked at it.
And said
they said
no
we didn't have standing. That's the other thing. They said we didn't have standing, a technicality. Can you imagine a system where a person in an election doesn't have standing? The President of the United States doesn't have standing. That's how we lost. If you look at the facts, and I'd love to have you'll do a special on it. I'll show you Georgia, and I'll show you Wisconsin, and I'll show you Pennsylvania, and I'll show you. We have so many facts and statistics, but you know what? That doesn't matter, because we have to solve the problem that we have right now. That's old news. And the problem that we have right now is we have a nation in decline, and they have put it into decline. We have a nation that is dying, David.
Mr. President, thank you. Vice President Harris, you heard the president there tonight. He said he didn't say that he lost by a whisker. So he still believes he did not lose the election that was won by President Biden and yourself. But I do want to ask you about something that's come up in the last couple of days. This was a post from President Trump about this upcoming election just weeks away. He said, when I win, those people who cheated, and then he lists donors, voters, election officials, he says will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, which will include long-term prison sentences. One of your campaign's top lawyers responded saying, we won't let Donald Trump intimidate us. We won't let him suppress the vote. Is that what you believe he's trying to do here?
Donald Trump was fired by 81 million people. So let's be clear about that. And clearly he is having a very difficult time processing that. But we cannot afford to have a president of the United States who attempts, as he did in the past, to upend the will of the voters in a free and fair election. And I'm going to tell you that I have traveled the world as Vice President of the United States, and world leaders are laughing at Donald Trump. I have talked with military leaders, some of whom worked with you, and they say you're a disgrace. And when you then talk in this way in a presidential debate and deny what over and over again are court cases you have lost because you did in fact lose that election, it leads one to believe that perhaps we do not have in the candidate to my right the temperament or the ability to not be confused about fact. That's deeply troubling, and the American people deserve better.
I'll give you 1 minute to respond, Mr. President.
Let me just say about world leaders. Viktor Orban, one of the most respected men, they call him a strong man. He's a tough person, smart, Prime Minister of Hungary. They said, why is the whole world blowing up? 3 years ago it wasn't. Why is it blowing up? He said, because you need Trump back as president. They were afraid of him. China was afraid, and I don't like to use the word afraid, but I'm just quoting him. China was afraid of him. North Korea was afraid of him. Look at what's going on with North Korea, by the way. He said Russia was afraid of him. I ended the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, and Biden put it back on day one, but he ended the XL pipeline. The XL pipeline in our country, he ended that. But he let the Russians build a pipeline going all over Europe and heading into Germany, the biggest pipeline in the world. Look, Viktor Orban said it. He said the most respected, most feared person is Donald Trump. We had no problems when Trump was president. But when this weak, pathetic man that you saw at a debate just a few months ago, that if he weren't in that debate, he'd be running instead of her. She got no votes. He got 14 million votes. What you did, you talk about a threat to democracy. He got 14 million votes, and they threw him out of office. And you know what? I'll give you a little secret. He hates her. He can't stand her. But he got 14 million votes. They threw him out. She got 0 votes. And when she ran, she was the first one to leave because she failed. And now she's running. I don't understand it, but I'm okay with it because
your time is
I think
up.
we're going to do very well.
We've got a lot more to get to.
Turning now to the Israel-Hamas war and the hostages who are still being held, Americans among them. Vice President Harris, in December, you said, quote, Israel has a right to defend itself, but you added, quote, it matters how, saying international humanitarian law must be respected. Israel must do more to protect innocent civilians. You said that 9 months ago. Now an estimated 40,000 Palestinians are dead. Nearly 100 hostages remain. Just last week, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said there's not a deal in the making. President Biden has not been able to break through the stalemate. How would you do it?
Well, let's understand how we got here. On October 7, Hamas, a terrorist organization, slaughtered 1,200 Israelis. Many of them young people who were simply attending a concert. Women were horribly raped. And so absolutely, I said then, I say now, Israel has a right to defend itself. We would. And how it does so matters. Because it is also true, far too many innocent Palestinians have been killed. Children, mothers. What we know is that this war must end. It must end immediately, and the way it will end is we need a ceasefire deal and we need the hostages out. And so we will continue to work around the clock on that. Work around the clock, also understanding that we must chart a course for a two-state solution. And in that solution, there must be security for the Israeli people and Israel, and in equal measure for the Palestinians. But the one thing I will assure you always, I will always give Israel the ability to defend itself, in particular as it relates to Iran and any threat that Iran and its proxies pose to Israel. But we must have a two-state solution where we can rebuild Gaza, where the Palestinians have security, self-determination, and the dignity they so rightly deserve.
President Trump, how would you negotiate with Netanyahu and also Hamas in order to get the hostages out and prevent the killing of more innocent civilians in Gaza?
If I were president, it would have never started. If I were president, Russia would have never, ever, I know Putin very well, he would have never, and there was no threat of it either, by the way, for 4 years, have gone into Ukraine and killed millions of people when you add it up, far worse than people understand what's going on over there. But when she mentions about Israel, all of a sudden, she hates Israel. She wouldn't even meet with Netanyahu when he went to Congress to make a very important speech. She refused to be there because she was at a sorority party of hers. She wanted to go to the sorority party. She hates Israel. If she's president, I believe that Israel will not exist within 2 years from now. And I've been pretty good at predictions, and I hope I'm wrong about that one. She hates Israel. At the same time, in her own way, she hates the Arab population because the whole place is going to get blown up. Arabs, Jewish people, Israel will be gone. It would have never happened. Iran was broke under Donald Trump. Now Iran has $300 billion because they took off all the sanctions that I had. Iran had no money for Hamas or Hezbollah or any of the 28 different spheres of terror. And they are spheres of terror, horrible terror. They had no money. It was a big story, and you know it. You covered it very well, actually. They had no money for terror. They were broke. Now they're a rich nation. And now what they're doing is they're spreading that money around. Look at what's happening with the Houthis and Yemen. Look at what's going on in the Middle East. This would have never happened. I will get that settled and fast, and I'll get the war with Ukraine and Russia ended. If I'm president-elect, I'll get it done before even becoming president.
Vice President Harris, he says you hate Israel.
That's absolutely not true. I have my entire career and life supported Israel and the Israeli people. He knows that. He's trying to, again, divide and distract from the reality, which is it is very well known that Donald Trump is weak and wrong on national security and foreign policy. It is well known that he admires dictators, wants to be a dictator on day one, according to himself. It is well known that he said of Putin that he can do whatever the hell he wants and go into Ukraine. It is well known that he said when Russia went into Ukraine, it was brilliant. It is well known he exchanged love letters with Kim Jong-un. And it is absolutely well known that these dictators and autocrats are rooting for you to be president again because they're so clear. They can manipulate you with flattery and favors. And that is why so many military leaders who you have worked with have told me you are a disgrace. That is why we understand that we have to have a president who is not consistently weak and wrong on national security, including the importance of upholding and respecting in highest regard our military.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
They're the ones, and she's the one that caused it, that's weak on national security by allowing every nation last month for the year, 168 different countries sending people into our country. Their crime rates are way down. Putin endorsed her last week, said, I hope she wins. And I think he meant it, because what he's gotten away with is absolutely incredible. It wouldn't have happened with me. The leaders of other countries think that they're weak and incompetent, and they are. They're grossly incompetent. And I just ask one question. Why does Biden go in and kill the Keystone Pipeline and approve the single biggest deal that Russia's ever made, Nord Stream 2, the biggest pipeline anywhere in the world going to Germany and all over Europe? Because they're weak and they're ineffective. And Biden, by the way,
President
gets paid
Trump,
a lot of money.
Thank you. We have a lot of issues to get to.
We'll be right back with much more of this historic ABC News presidential debate from the National Constitution Center right here in Philadelphia. Back in a moment.
The ABC News presidential debate will continue after this. Live from the National Constitution Center in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Here again, David Muir and Lindsay Davis.
Welcome back to this historic ABC News presidential debate tonight. We're going to continue here, and I want to turn to the war in Ukraine. We're now 2.5 years into this conflict. Mr. President, it has been the position of the Biden administration that we must defend Ukraine from Russia, from Vladimir Putin, to defend their sovereignty, their democracy, that it's in America's best interest to do so, arguing that if Putin wins, he may be emboldened to move even further into other countries. You have said you would solve this war in 24 hours. You said so just before the break tonight. How exactly would you do that? And I want to ask you a very simple question tonight. Do you want Ukraine to win this war?
I want the war to stop. I want to save lives that are being uselessly, people being killed by the millions. It's the millions. It's so much worse than the numbers that you're getting, which are fake numbers. Look, we're in for 250 billion or more because they don't ask Europe, which is a much bigger beneficiary to getting this thing done than we are. They're in for $150 billion less because Biden and you don't have the courage to ask Europe like I did with NATO. They paid billions and billions, hundreds of billions of dollars when I said, either you pay up or we're not going to protect you anymore. So that's maybe one of the reasons they don't like me as much as they like weak people. But you take a look at what's happening. We're in for 250 to 275 billion. They're into 100 to 150. They should be forced to equalize. With that being said, I want to get the war settled. I know Zelensky very well, and I know Putin very well. I have a good relationship, and they respect your president, okay? They respect me. They don't respect Biden. How would you respect him? Why? For what reason? He hasn't even made a phone call in 2 years to Putin, hasn't spoken to anybody. They don't even try and get it. That is a war that's dying to be settled. I will get it settled before I even become president. If I win, when I'm president-elect, and what I'll do is I'll speak to one, I'll speak to the other, I'll get them together. That war would have never happened. And in fact, when I saw Putin after I left, unfortunately left because our country has gone to hell. But after I left, when I saw him building up soldiers, he did it after I left, I said, oh, he must be negotiating. It must be a good, strong point of negotiation. Well, it wasn't, because Biden had no idea how to talk to him. He had no idea how to stop it. And now you have millions of people dead, and it's only getting worse, and it could lead to World War III. Don't kid yourself, David. We're playing with World War III, and we have a president that we don't even know if he's... Where is our president? We don't even know if he's a president.
And just to clarify
they threw him out of a campaign like a dog. We don't even know. Is he our president? But we have a president,
Mr. President,
that doesn't know he's alive.
Your time is up. Just to clarify in the question, do you believe it's in the U.S. best interest for Ukraine to win this war, yes or no?
I think it's the U.S. best interest to get this war finished and just get it done.
All right.
Negotiate a deal, because we have to stop all of these human lives from being destroyed.
I want to take this to Vice President Harris. I want to get your thoughts on support for Ukraine in this moment, but also, as Commander-in-Chief, if elected, how would you deal with Vladimir Putin, and would it be any different from what we're seeing from President Biden?
Well, first of all, it's important to remind the former president you're not running against Joe Biden, you're running against me. I believe the reason that Donald Trump says that this war would be over within 24 hours is because he would just give it up. And that's not who we are as Americans. Let's understand what happened here. I actually met with Zelensky a few days before Russia invaded, tried through force to change territorial boundaries, to defy one of the most important international rules and norms, which is the importance of sovereignty and territorial integrity. And I met with President Zelensky. I shared with him American intelligence about how he could defend himself. Days later, I went to NATO's eastern flank, to Poland and Romania. And through the work that I and others did, we brought 50 countries together to support Ukraine in its righteous defense. And because of our support, because of the air defense, the ammunition, the artillery, the javelins, the Abrams tanks that we have provided, Ukraine stands as an independent and free country. If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now. And understand what that would mean, because Putin's agenda is not just about Ukraine. Understand why the European allies and our NATO allies are so thankful that you are no longer president and that we understand the importance of the greatest military alliance the world has ever known, which is NATO, and what we have done to preserve the ability of Zelensky and the Ukrainians to fight for their independence. Otherwise, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv with his eyes on the rest of Europe, starting with Poland. And why don't you tell the 800,000 Polish Americans right here in Pennsylvania how quickly you would give up for the sake of favor and what you think is a friendship with what is known to be a dictator who would eat you for lunch.
Vice President Harris, thank you. We've heard from both of you on Ukraine tonight. Afghanistan came up in the last hour. I wanted her to respond to something you said earlier, and I'll give you a minute here.
Putin would be sitting in Moscow, and he wouldn't have lost 300,000 men and women, but he would have been sitting in Moscow. Quiet, please. He would have been sitting in Moscow, much happier than he is right now. But eventually, he's got a thing that other people don't have. He's got nuclear weapons. They don't ever talk about that. He's got nuclear weapons. Nobody ever thinks about that. And eventually, maybe he'll use them, and maybe he hasn't been that threatening. But he does have that, something we don't even like to talk about. Nobody likes to talk about it. But just so you understand, they sent her to negotiate peace before this war started. 3 days later, he went in and he started the war because everything they said was weak and stupid. They said the wrong things. That war should have never started. She was the emissary. They sent her in to negotiate with Zelensky and Putin, and she did. And the war started 3 days later. And that's the kind of talent we have with her. She's worse than Biden. In my opinion, I think he's the worst president in the history of our country. She goes down as the worst vice president in the history of our country. But let me tell you something. She is a horrible negotiator. They sent her in to negotiate. As soon as they left, Putin did the invasion.
President Trump, thank you. You did bring up something. You said she went to negotiate with Vladimir Putin. Vice President Harris, have you ever met Vladimir Putin? Can you clarify tonight?
Yet again, I said it at the beginning of this debate, you're going to hear a bunch of lies coming from this fellow. And that is another one. When I went to meet with President Zelensky, I've now met with him over 5 times. The reality is it has been about standing as America always should, as a leader upholding international rules and norms, as a leader who shows strength, understanding that the alliances we have around the world are dependent on our ability to look out for our friends and not favor our enemies because you adore strong men instead of caring about democracy. And that is very much what is at stake here. The President of the United States is Commander-in-Chief. And the American people have a right to rely on a president who understands the significance of America's role and responsibility in terms of ensuring that there is stability and ensuring we stand up for our principles and not sell them for the benefit of personal flattery.
We've talked about Ukraine and Vladimir Putin. I do want to talk about Afghanistan. It came up in the first hour of this debate. I want to move on to Afghanistan.
Stoltenberg said Trump did the most amazing thing I've ever seen. He got these countries, the 28 countries at the time, to pay up. He said, I've never seen. He's the head of NATO. He said, I've never seen. For years, we were paying almost all of NATO. We were being ripped off by European nations, both on trade and on NATO. I got them to pay up by saying one of the statements you made before, if you don't pay, we're not going to protect you. Otherwise, we would have never gotten it. He said it was one of the most incredible jobs that he's ever seen done.
Thank you. I want to turn to Afghanistan. It came up in the first hour of the debate, and we witnessed a poignant moment today on Capitol Hill, honoring the soldiers who died in the chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan. I do want to ask the Vice President, do you believe you bear any responsibility in the way that withdrawal played out?
Well, I will tell you, I agreed with President Biden's decision to pull out of Afghanistan. 4 presidents said they would, and Joe Biden did. And as a result, America's taxpayers are not paying the $300 million a day we were paying for that endless war. And as of today, there is not one member of the United States military who is in active duty in a combat zone in any war zone around the world, the first time this century. But let's understand how we got to where we are. Donald Trump, when he was president, negotiated one of the weakest deals you can imagine. He calls himself a deal maker. Even his national security advisor said it was a weak, terrible deal. And here's how it went down. He bypassed the Afghan government. He negotiated directly with a terrorist organization called the Taliban. The negotiation involved the Taliban getting 5,000 Taliban terrorists released. And get this. And the president at the time invited the Taliban to Camp David, a place of storied significance for us as Americans, a place where we honor the importance of American diplomacy, where we invite and receive respected world leaders. And this former president, as president, invited them to Camp David because he does not again appreciate the role and responsibility of the President of the United States to be commander-in-chief with a level of respect. And this gets back to the point of how he has consistently disparaged and demeaned members of our military, fallen soldiers, and the work that we must do to uphold the strength and the respect of the United States of America around the world.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump, your response to her saying that you began the negotiations with the Taliban.
So, if you take a look at that period of time, the Taliban was killing our soldiers, a lot of them, with snipers. And I got involved with the Taliban because the Taliban was doing the killing. That's the fighting force within Afghanistan. They don't bother doing that because, they deal with the wrong people all the time. But I got involved. And Abdul is the head of the Taliban. He is still the head of the Taliban. And I told Abdul, don't do it anymore. You do it anymore, you're going to have problems. And he said, why do you send me a picture of my house? I said, you're going to have to figure that out, Abdul. And for 18 months, we had nobody killed. We did have an agreement negotiated by Mike Pompeo. It was a very good agreement. The reason it was good, we were getting out. We would have been out faster than them, but we wouldn't have lost the soldiers. We wouldn't have left many Americans behind, and we wouldn't have left $85 billion worth of brand new, beautiful military equipment behind. And just to finish, they blew it. The agreement said you have to do this, and they didn't do it. The agreement was terminated by us because they didn't do what they were supposed to do.
I want to move on.
And these people did the worst withdrawal and, in my opinion, the most embarrassing moment in the history of our country. And by the way, that's why Russia attacked Ukraine, because they saw how incompetent she and her boss are.
President Trump, thank you. I want to move on now to race and politics in this country. Mr. President, you recently said of Vice President Harris, quote, I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black, and now she wants to be known as black. I want to ask a bigger picture question here tonight. Why do you believe it's appropriate to weigh in on the racial identity of your opponent?
I don't, and I don't care. I don't care what she is. I don't care. You make a big deal out of something. I couldn't care less. Whatever she wants to be is okay with me.
But those were your words, so I'm asking.
I don't know. I mean, all I can say is I read where she was not black, that she put out, and I'll say that. And then I read that she was black, and that's okay. Either one was okay with me. That's up to her. Up to her.
Vice President Harris, your thoughts on this?
Honestly, I think it's a tragedy that we have someone who wants to be president who has consistently, over the course of his career, attempted to use race to divide the American people. I do believe that the vast majority of us know that we have so much more in common than what separates us, and we don't want this kind of approach that is just constantly trying to divide us, and especially by race. And let's remember how Donald Trump started. He was land, he owned buildings, and he was investigated because he refused to rent property to black families. Let's remember, this is the same individual who took out a full-page ad in the New York Times calling for the execution of 5 young black and Latino boys who were innocent, the Central Park 5. Took out a full-page ad calling for their execution. This is the same individual who spread birther lies about the first black president of the United States. And I think the American people want better than that, want better than this, want someone who understands, as I do, I travel our country. We see in each other a friend. We see in each other a neighbor. We don't want a leader who is constantly trying to have Americans point their fingers at each other. I meet with people all the time who tell me, can we please just have discourse about how we're going to invest in the aspirations and the ambitions and the dreams of the American people? Knowing that regardless of people's color or the language their grandmother speaks, we all have the same dreams and aspirations and want a president who invests in those, not in hate and division.
Vice President Harris, thank you. Lindsay?
President Trump, this is now your third time.
This is the most divisive presidency in the history of our country. There's never been anything like it. They're destroying our country, and they come up with things like what she just said, going back many, many years, when a lot of people, including Mayor Bloomberg, agreed with me on the Central Park Five. They admitted, they said, they pled guilty. And I said, well, if they pled guilty, they badly hurt a person, killed a person ultimately. And if they pled guilty, then they pled, we're not guilty. But this is a person that has to stretch back years, 40, 50 years ago, because there's nothing now. I built one of the greatest economies in the history of the world, and I'm going to build it again. It's going to be bigger, better, and stronger. But they're destroying our economy. They have no idea what a good economy is. Their oil policies, every single policy. And remember this, she is Biden. You know, she's trying to get away from Biden. I don't know the gentleman, she says. She is Biden. The worst inflation we've ever had, a horrible economy because inflation has made it so bad, and she can't get away with that.
Thank you. Your time is up, Lindsay.
I want to respond to that, though. I want to just respond briefly. Clearly, I am not Joe Biden, and I am certainly not Donald Trump. And what I do offer is a new generation of leadership for our country, one who believes in what is possible, one who brings a sense of optimism about what we can do instead of always disparaging the American people. I believe in what we can do to strengthen our small businesses, which is why I have a plan. Let's talk about our plans and let's compare the plans. I have a plan to give startup businesses $50,000 tax deduction, to pursue their ambitions, their innovation, their ideas, their hard work. I have a plan, $6,000 for young families for the first year of your child's life, to help you in that most critical stage of your child's development. I have a plan that is about allowing people to be able to pursue what has been fleeting in terms of the American dream by offering a help with down payment of $25,000 down payment assistance for first-time home buyers. That's the kind of conversation, I believe, David, that people really want tonight, as opposed to a conversation that is constantly about belittling and name-calling. Let's turn the page
Vice President
and move
Harris,
forward.
Thank you. Let's turn to policy.
President Trump, we have to move on. President Trump.
Let's turn to policy, please.
She has a plan to defund the police. She has a plan to confiscate everybody's gun.
President Trump,
she
we
has
do
a
have to
plan
move on to
not
other
allow
issues.
fracking in Pennsylvania or anywhere else.
Okay.
That's what her
President.
plan is until just recently.
I just need
Lindsay,
to
go ahead.
respond
President
because
Trump,
no, the
President
former
Trump,
president has said
no, I'm
something
sorry.
twice that I need to respond
No,
to.
I'm sorry. We're going to move on, Vice President Harris.
To what he has
President
said
Trump, this is
multiple
now
times.
your third time running for president. You have long vowed to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare. You have failed to accomplish that. You now say you're going to keep Obamacare, quote, unless we can do something much better.
Correct.
Last month, you said, quote, we're working on it. So tonight, 9 years after you first started running, do you have a plan, and can you tell us what it is?
Obamacare was lousy health care, always was. It's not very good today. And what I said, that if we come up with something, and we are working on things, we're going to do it and we're going to replace it. But remember this, I inherited Obamacare because Democrats wouldn't change it. They wouldn't vote for it. They were unanimous. They wouldn't vote to change it. If they would have done that, we would have had a much better plan than Obamacare. But the Democrats came up. They wouldn't vote for it. I had a choice to make when I was president. Do I save it and make it as good as it can be, never going to be great, or do I let it rot? And I felt I had an obligation, even though politically it would have been good to just let it rot and let it go away. I decided, and I told my people, the top people, and they're very good people. I have a lot of good people in that administration. We read about the bad ones. We had some real bad ones, too, and so do they. They have really bad ones. The difference is they don't get rid of them. But let me just explain. I had a choice to make. Do I save it and make it as good as it can be, or do I let it rot? And I saved it. I did the right thing. But it's still never going to be great, and it's too expensive for people. And what we will do is we're looking at different plans. If we can come up with a plan that's going to cost our people, our population, less money and be better health care than Obamacare, then I would absolutely do it. But until then, I'd run it as good as it can be run.
So just a yes or no, you still do not have a plan?
I have concepts of a plan. I'm not president right now. But if we come up with something, I would only change it if we come up with something that's better and less expensive. And there are concepts and options we have to do that. And you'll be hearing about it in the not too distant future.
Vice President Harris, in 2017, you supported Bernie Sanders' proposal to do away with private insurance and create a government-run healthcare system. 2 years later, you proposed a plan that included a private insurance option. What is your plan today?
Well, first of all, I absolutely support, and over the last 4 years as vice president, private health care options. But what we need to do is maintain and grow the Affordable Care Act. But I'll get to that, Lindsay. I just need to respond to a previous point that the former president has made. I've made very clear my position on fracking. And then this business about taking everyone's guns away. Tim Walz and I are both gun owners. We're not taking anybody's guns away. So stop with the continuous lying about this stuff. As it relates to the Affordable Care Act, understand, just look at the history to know where people stand. When Donald Trump was president, 60 times he tried to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. 60 times. I was a senator at the time when I will never forget the early morning hours when it was up for a vote in the United States Senate. And the late, great John McCain, who you have disparaged as being, you don't like him, you said, at the time because he got caught. He was an American hero. The late, great John McCain, I will never forget that night, walked onto the Senate floor and said, no, you don't. No, you don't. No, you don't get rid of the Affordable Care Act. You have no plan. And what the Affordable Care Act has done is eliminate the ability of insurance companies to deny people with pre-existing conditions. I don't have to tell the people watching tonight, you remember what that was like? Remember when an insurance company could deny if a child had asthma, if someone was a breast cancer survivor, if a grandparent had diabetes? And thankfully, as I've been vice president and we over the last 4 years have strengthened the Affordable Care Act, we have allowed for the first time Medicare to negotiate drug prices on behalf of you, the American people. Donald Trump said he was going to allow Medicare to negotiate drug prices. He never did. We did. And now we have capped the cost of insulin at $35 a month. Since I've been vice president, we have capped the cost of prescription medication for seniors at $2,000 a year. And when I am president, we will do that for all people, understanding that the value I bring to this is that access to health care should be a right and not just a privilege of those who can afford it. And the plan has to be to strengthen the Affordable Care Act, not get rid of it.
Vice President Harris,
in terms of where Donald Trump stands on that.
I want to move to an issue that's important for a lot of...
You made a mistake. At number one, John McCain fought Obamacare for 10 years. But it wasn't only him. It were all of the Democrats that kept it going. And you know what? We can do much better than Obamacare, much less money. But she won't improve private insurance for people, private medical insurance. That's another thing she doesn't want to get. People are paying privately for insurance that have worked hard and made money, and they want to have private. She wants everybody to be on government insurance where you wait 6 months for an operation that you need immediately.
President Trump, thank you. We have another issue that we'd like to get to that's important for a number of Americans, in particular younger voters, and that's climate change. President Trump, with regard to the environment, you say that we have to have clean air and clean water. Vice President Harris, you call climate change an existential threat. The question to you both tonight is, what would you do to fight climate change? And Vice President Harris, we'll start with you. 1 minute for you each.
Well, the former president had said that climate change is a hoax. And what we know is that it is very real. You ask anyone who lives in a state who has experienced these extreme weather occurrences, who now is either being denied home insurance or it's being jacked up. You ask anybody who has been the victim of what that means in terms of losing their home, having nowhere to go. We know that we can actually deal with this issue. The young people of America care deeply about this issue. And I am proud that as vice president over the last 4 years, we have invested $1 trillion in a clean energy economy, while we have also increased domestic gas production to historic levels. We have created over 800,000 new manufacturing jobs while I have been vice president. We have invested in clean energy to the point that we are opening up factories around the world. Donald Trump said he was going to create manufacturing jobs. He lost manufacturing jobs. And I'm also proud to have the endorsement of the United Auto Workers and Sean Fain, who also know that part of building a clean energy economy includes investing in American-made products, American automobiles. It includes growing what we can do around American manufacturing and opening up auto plants, not closing them like happened under Donald Trump.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
That didn't happen under Donald Trump. Let me just tell you, they lost 10,000 manufacturing jobs this last month. They're all leaving. They're building big auto plants in Mexico, in many cases owned by China. They're building these massive plants, and they think they're going to sell their cars into the United States because of these people. What they have given to China is unbelievable. But we're not going to let that. We'll put tariffs on those cars so they can't come into our country, because they will kill the United Auto Workers and any auto worker, whether it's in Detroit or South Carolina or any other place. What they've done to business and manufacturing in this country is horrible. We have nothing because they refuse. You know, Biden doesn't go after people because supposedly China paid him millions of dollars. He's afraid to do it. Between him and his son, they get all this money from Ukraine. They get all this money from all of these different countries. And then you wonder, why is he so loyal to this one, that one, Ukraine, China? Why is he? Why did he get $3.5 million from the mayor of Moscow's wife? Why did she pay him $3.5 million? This is a crooked administration, and they're selling our country down the tubes.
President Trump, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be right back with closing statements from both of our candidates. An historic night, this ABC News presidential debate from Philadelphia. Back in a moment.
Live from the National Constitution Center in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Here again, David Muir and Lindsay Davis.
Welcome back tonight. The time has come for closing statements, and Vice President Harris, we begin with you.
So I think you've heard tonight two very different visions for our country. One that is focused on the future, and the other that is focused on the past, and an attempt to take us backward. But we're not going back. And I do believe that the American people know we all have so much more in common than what separates us. And we can chart a new way forward. And a vision of that includes having a plan, understanding the aspirations, the dreams, the hopes, the ambition of the American people, which is why I intend to create an opportunity economy, investing in small businesses, in new families, in what we can do around protecting seniors, what we can do that is about giving hardworking folks a break and bringing down the cost of living. I believe in what we can do together that is about sustaining America's standing in the world and ensuring that we have the respect that we so rightly deserve, including respecting our military and ensuring we have the most lethal fighting force in the world. I will be a president that will protect our fundamental rights and freedoms, including the right of a woman to make decisions about her own body and not have her government tell her what to do. I'll tell you, I started my career as a prosecutor. I was a DA, I was an attorney general, a United States senator, and now vice president. I've only had one client, the people. And I'll tell you, as a prosecutor, I never asked a victim or a witness, are you a Republican or a Democrat? The only thing I ever asked them, are you okay? And that's the kind of president we need right now. Someone who cares about you and is not putting themselves first. I intend to be a president for all Americans and focus on what we can do over the next 10 and 20 years to build back up our country by investing right now in you, the American people.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump?
So she just started by saying she's going to do this, she's going to do that, she's going to do all these wonderful things. Why hasn't she done it? She's been there for 3.5 years. They've had 3.5 years to fix the border. They've had 3.5 years to create jobs and all the things we talked about. Why hasn't she done it? She should leave right now, go down to that beautiful White House, go to the Capitol, get everyone together and do the things you want to do, but you haven't done it and you won't do it because you believe in things that the American people don't believe in. You believe in things like we're not going to frack. We're not going to take fossil fuel. We're not going to do things that are going to make this country strong, whether you like it or not. Germany tried that, and within 1 year, they were back to building normal energy plants. We're not ready for it. We can't sacrifice our country for the sake of bad vision. But I just ask one simple question. Why didn't she do it? We're a failing nation. We're a nation that's in serious decline. We're being laughed at all over the world. All over the world, they're laughed. I know the leaders very well. They're coming to see me. They call me. We're laughed at all over the world. They don't understand what happened to us as a nation. We're not a leader. We don't have any idea what's going on. We have wars going on in the Middle East. We have wars going on with Russia and Ukraine. We're going to end up in a third world war, and it'll be a war like no other because of nuclear weapons, the power of weaponry. I rebuilt our entire military. She gave a lot of it away to the Taliban. She gave it to Afghanistan. What these people have done to our country, and maybe toughest of all, is allowing millions of people to come into our country. Many of them are criminals, and they're destroying our country. The worst president, the worst vice president in the history of our country.
President Trump, thank you. And that is our ABC News presidential debate from here in Philadelphia at the National Constitution Center. I'm Lindsay Davis.
And I'm David Muir. Thank you for watching here in the U.S. and all over the world, and from all of us here at ABC News. Good night.
Thank you.
All right, and back out live there to Philadelphia. This is Andrew Kraft. You just watched the ABC News presidential debate there. More than 90 minutes between Vice President Harris and former President Donald Trump. At times it got tense. It got personal. Yes, substantive policy was discussed here, but there were moments, and we want to get into them. How will this move the needle or the dial for so many of you who were watching as we are now 56 days away from the presidential election? I'm Andrew Kraft. Thanks so much for being with us here. Let's get right into the question we all ask ourselves after these presidential debates here. Well, who won? I want to put up the question. I want to pose the question to all of you. It seems like some of you have already voted here. We got three options. Did Trump win the debate? Did Harris win the debate? Or was there no clear winner? Now, you can scan that QR code in the upper right hand of your screen, or you can go to livenowfox.com/connect. We'll be telling you how many of you participated in this poll. It looks like Trump overwhelmingly, according to you who have chimed in on this question, believe that Trump won the debate. And so we'll be periodically bringing out this question to you time and time again. And we are going to begin our post-debate analysis, our post-debate coverage. And like I said, there is a lot to get to. I'm Andrew Kraft. Let's get right to it. Let's bring into the conversation right now our friends there at 24-Site, Tom LoBianco, and at Notice, Catherine Swartz. They join me. Tom, Catherine, thanks for being with us here. Let's first start with you, Tom. What was the headline of the night?
I think coming out of this, it looked like a reminder of Trump when he was in office. Kamala Harris here, I think, successfully skirted having to answer a lot of tough questions on policy. And Trump just let himself fall into the quicksand. I mean, some of those answers, I keep coming back to this. I was texting with some sources about this. We were discussing it at the 24-Site chat earlier. When he had this answer, which is demonstrably false, but alleging that people are eating cats and dogs across the country, if you're not like us, if you're not dialed into this stuff constantly, if you're a regular viewing audience at home, and this is your first time experiencing that, you're probably thinking, what the heck was this guy talking about? And that's exactly what the Harris campaign wanted. They wanted a reminder of the wildness and chaos of Trump. And these things are about getting through to potential swing voters, trying to win over new voters. And in this case, he didn't do that. He played to his base. I don't see this working well for him.
Catherine, I'm going to pose the same question to you. What